I am going to start the Emerging Technologies and Automation Virtual Conference. Welcome, everybody. Of course, we wish we were seeing you in person this year, but next year, 2022, that's what I'm hoping for. Today's event is kicking off Tech Week in YQG, so we're pretty excited to be the first event up. And it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce the Honorable Eric Mearscheck, Member of Parliament for Windsor-Tecumseh, and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion. Eric is passionate for his community, and his service led him to a career on Windsor City Council where he was elected 3 consecutive times. Eric and I first met in his role as the Director of Partnerships for WeTech Alliance. And throughout this time, he built partnerships with industry, with the University of Windsor, with St. Clair College and our local community schools. And he is a big champion and advocate for FIRST Robotics program in WindsorEssex, which prepares young people for careers in skilled trades and STEM. And he recruited me. He convinced me that I needed to be a judge, and it was one of the best weekends of my life. Eric graduated from Vanderbilt University with a PhD, with a specialization in local government and cross-border environmental regulations for the Great Lakes Basin. So what better champion could we have for this region than my friend Eric? Welcome, Eric. I'm so glad you're here today.
Well, thank you so much, Lee. And I wanted to congratulate you especially on the 6th edition of the Emerging Technologies and Automation Conference. I know that you and the whole team at the WindsorEssex Economic Development Corporation have poured your heart and souls into this burgeoning conference, and it really is the place to be. So I just wanted to start off by saying congratulations for all of your hard work. Last week, I was beyond grateful to accept Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's invitation to continue serving Canadians in this role as a parliamentary secretary. And I'm delighted for the opportunity to be here with all of you today and be part of this incredible conference. Through hard work and teamwork, our ministry has rolled out a number of critical programs this past year in record time, especially for government. Many of these programs have supported Canadian families and workers through the storm of the pandemic, including things like the CERB, the Canada Recovery Benefits, and a more flexible and accessible employment insurance. But before we start, I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to all of you from the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy, and that includes the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. And so again, I just want to emphasize it is an absolute pleasure for me to be here with all of you today, kicking off Tech Week YQG with the very first virtual Emerging Technologies and Automation Conference. This series is powered by our federal government's Women Entrepreneurship Strategy in partnership with the WindsorEssex Economic Development Corporation, Automate Canada, Innovation Guelph, and the National Research Council's Industrial Research Assistance Program. Thanks very much for the important work that you do to support Canadian innovation, and specifically the success of women entrepreneurs. Thank you as well for preparing and inspiring the program. Today, we'll learn more about the journeys of 5 women entrepreneurs from across Canada, 5 pioneers who have skillfully leveraged partnerships, new technologies, and federal support to develop Made in Canada solutions. Karen Lai, the CEO, KPM Power Inc., Madison Guy, founder and CEO, Grant Me Education Consulting, Pooja Viswanathan, Braze Mobility Inc., as well as 2 of WindsorEssex's own, Nancy Campagna, owner of Nuvo Event Planning, and Andrea Descarger of Green City Plastics. I am looking forward to hearing from 2 lifelong entrepreneurs, former CBC Dragon, Bruce Croxon, and IBM Vice President, professional speaker, and author, Paul Zikopoulos. Since 2015, advancing gender equality and supporting the success of women entrepreneurship and women-owned businesses has been of the highest priority for our government and for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We all know the statistics. Ensuring the full and equal participation of women would add up to $150 billion to Canada's economy by 2026 and $12 trillion to the global economy. But beyond the numbers, women and girls strengthen our communities, our country, and our world. In 2018, our government developed Canada's first ever Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, an investment of more than $5 billion to advance gender equality and women's economic empowerment, and to ensure each and every girl and woman can contribute to their full potential. As part of the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, we also created the WES Ecosystem Fund, dedicating $85 million to close gaps for women entrepreneurs, help strengthen capacity within the entrepreneurship ecosystem, and forge new pathways for success. But after a challenging year that has disproportionately impacted women and those who are already marginalized, vulnerable, or struggling, an inclusive recovery from COVID-19 is more important than ever. Some of the long-standing barriers that women and underrepresented entrepreneurs were already facing, including difficulty accessing capital and fewer business supports, have been compounded by COVID-19. Temporary business closures during periods of lockdown have most severely affected sectors that predominantly employ women, including tourism, hospitality, accommodation, and service sectors. Women have lost their jobs at a higher rate during this pandemic than men, and research shows they are regaining employment at a much slower rate than men. But we refuse to allow the pandemic to claw back the hard-fought social and economic progress made by women in Canada. Canada's recovery depends on ensuring women can re-enter the workforce and secure good, well-paying jobs now and into the future. And that's why our government has taken action to support businesses with emergency supports like the partially forgivable $60,000 CEBA loan, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and Rent Subsidy, and the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. We have also provided women entrepreneurs with much needed targeted support to help them recover and position their businesses for success into the future. In May 2020, my friend and colleague, Small Business Minister Mary Ng, announced an additional $15 million to further support existing ecosystem fund recipients and women entrepreneurs through the pandemic. This funding is already assisting 16 organizations that are working with thousands of women entrepreneurs from Thunder Bay to Windsor. We are also taking steps to create a stronger and fairer Canada by including women in the response to Canada's recovery. In the 2020 speech from the throne, the government made a commitment to make targeted investments to help more women get back into the workforce through an action plan for women in the economy. On International Women's Day, Ministers Chrystia Freeland and Mona Fortier announced the diverse group of experts that will comprise a new task force on women in the economy to advise the government on a feminist action plan that addresses issues of gender equality as we move beyond the pandemic. We created the Feminist Response and Recovery Fund, which is providing funding to organizations that are working to create economic opportunity for women and girls, improving their access to leadership and decision-making positions, and ending gender-based violence. In a roundtable I hosted in November between the Honorable Miriam Monsef, Minister of Women and Gender Equality, and over 15 women entrepreneurs from WindsorEssex, we heard loud and clear that the closure of schools and childcare services resulted in many parents having to reduce their hours of work or leave their jobs entirely to look after their families. These impacts have been felt disproportionately by mothers. But our country and our economy cannot succeed if half of the country is held back. And that is why we are committed to making a significant, sustained, and long-term investment to create a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system. Access to affordable, quality childcare will give our children a good start in life, help Canadians find and keep good jobs, and create a more resilient country and economy. The Government of Canada also invested over $11 million through the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy program to help hundreds of women get the support and skills training they need to enter the workforce. And I was honored to join Rose and her wonderful team of inspiring women last week to announce a $1.65 million partnership with Women Enterprise Skills Training, or west of Windsor through the federal Yes strategy, helping them to continue their incredible Young Women in Lead program until April 2023. Organizations like West of Windsor, WindsorEssex Economic Development Corporation, and Innovation Guelph are making a difference for women across Canada, giving them the skills, the tools, and the mentorship they need at a time when they need it most. To women entrepreneurs, I want you to know that our government recognizes and values your contributions and innovations. And we will continue to make investments to ensure women-owned businesses grow in Canada. Our communities and our country have been through a lot over the last year, and it has been a tough climb, the toughest ever. But together we've walked the path, neighbor looking out for neighbor. With millions of vaccines arriving in Canada this week and every week for the rest of spring, we're almost there on the other side. And as we work to rebuild, we will continue to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to support Canadian families, workers, and Canadian entrepreneurs. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you for inviting me to share a few words. And it is now my pleasure to introduce automation extraordinaire and entrepreneur, the chair of Automate Canada, Shelley Fellows. Over to you, Shelley.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate your words today, and as you can imagine, it strikes a very personal chord with me, so thank you. Well, then, good afternoon, and welcome to the 2021 Emerging Technologies in Automation Conference. My name is Shelley Fellows. I am the chair of an industry association called Automate Canada. Automate Canada has its origins in this very conference. Several years ago now, as you said, Eric, this is the 6th year. We realized what incredible technologies have been developed by Canadian companies and what a real cluster of automation and technology companies we have right here in Windsor-Essex. Thus was born Automate Canada. Fast forward to today, 2021, and this conference has done what many in the manufacturing sector will recognize as a fundamental part of Industry 4.0, harnessing the power of computers and software technology to improve how we produce our goods and our services. For this Emerging Technologies in Automation show or conference, this means pivoting to a digital version of this engaging conference. So yes, we're not face-to-face this year, Lee. We don't have trade show booths, but man, we've got the right spirit in this Zoom room today. We're going to hear from speakers on the technologies that they deliver, the innovations that they've created as part of their businesses. Collaboration is a cornerstone of successful automation companies. And again, this conference is showing us what is possible through effective collaboration. Innovation Guelph is a key partner for this conference, as are, of course, the WindsorEssex Economic Development Corporation, NRC IRAP, WeTech Alliance, Rise WindsorEssex, FedDev, the Province of Ontario, and the Small Business Centre in WindsorEssex. Libro Credit Union is one of our valued sponsors today. So today, you'll learn that tech comes in many shapes and sizes. For all of us, though, it's engaging, it's stimulating, and it's challenging. I hope that you'll find today's conference engages your curiosity, stimulates new thought processes, and challenges you to make change possible. Let's get started. I'll turn it over to Vlad Franjo, Industrial Research Advisor with NRC IRAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. This is a highlight event for WindsorEssex IRAP office as well. IRAP stands for it's a National Research Council of Canada program, Industrial Research Assistance Program. That's what IRAP stands for. It is a federal government program focused on growing Canadian small to medium enterprises through development of new technologies now for over 75 years. Our goal for this event with outstanding partners, WindsorEssex Economic Development Corporation, Automate Canada, Innovation Guelph, is the same. Help Canadian automation companies get better, commercialize new technologies, and grow. I have a great honor and pleasure to introduce the keynote speakers today. Paul Zikopoulos is the Vice President of IBM Technology Group Skills, Vitality and Enablement, and an award-winning writer and speaker who has been consulted on the topic of artificial intelligence and big data by the popular TV show 60 Minutes. Paul has written 20 books on data analytics, big data, and AI, and over 360 articles during the 25 years he's been focused on data. Paul is taking a very active role around women in technology, general workplace inclusivity, and coding for veterans. Paul's talk last year was thought-provoking, sparked ideas, and left us with many practical tips to automate our daily tasks during our virtual life in this pandemic. I can't wait to hear and see what Paul has to share with us this year. Welcome, Paul Zikopoulos.
All right, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm just going to share my screen. And it's a privilege. First, it's a privilege for your time, first and foremost. And you all have things that you could be doing, and to be here with me and this event around such inspiring stories that are really close to my heart. As you know, or those who know me, I sit on the board of Women 2.0, which is one of the largest organizations for profit focused on entrepreneurial women, and that is worldwide. And that's a privilege, and to be honored with these entrepreneurial spirits and women here around technology and automation, I couldn't place that I really want to be. And so today, I want to talk to you about this emerging issue, if you will. It could be competitive advantage, but around trust, ethics, and bias, and talking about the kind of AI actor that you're going to become. Because as I look forward into the next 5-10 years, there will be no tech companies, because all companies will be tech companies. If there's one thing that I think COVID has taught everyone, large and small, what the new normal, the next normal, whatever phase we're going into, truly is that there were thrivers, divers, and new arrivers, and technology is going to play a key role. And I want to kind of take you through some of these kinds of things. And you think about automation and where technology to play, and it's every industry, from fitness to agriculture to finance, detection of face mask adherence, distance adherence, right? Computers and cameras can detect this. You look at the instrumentation of video across all kinds of cities worldwide, and auto-generating maps of close proximity to violate or if there's violation, feet apart types of things, or where we can go and focus on areas. You know, this is going to be a key piece, especially as we transition into this semi-vaccinated position that we're going to be in the ensuing months. And then I think, where else is AI? I was going to talk about this windmill company called Vestas, but you know, I hear some folks have talked to me and they're like, I'm nervous about taking this COVID vaccine. And I said, why? They're like, oh, it came out too fast. I said, you don't realize the amount of AI and data and science, genomic sequencing that went behind this. They were able to collect more data than they could in half a decade within a year. And just like Vestas, when they try to simulate or wonder where they're going to place a windmill for the best results in the yield, right? This kind of more accurate, richer models with AI is how we speed time to market. And that helps every business, including the health of Canadians. And you think about AI now pushing itself into things like consequence of failure modeling. So underwriting risk has become a very expensive business for water damage, for Canadian insurers. You look at the California wildfires. So again, this is all AI and putting data to work underneath the covers. And finally, I think the whole agricultural industry is going to change with the emergence of smart algorithms, swarm behavior. And so we're so used to seeing how fields are planted, and there's the emergence of these big, large autonomous tractors. But the push to kind of micro swarming, these little robots that walk around, they plant the right seed in the location of the field that gets more sun, right, versus one that gets more rain. They have a bespoke seed, and then they communicate with each other under their planting patterns and those types of things. So bottom line is technology's everywhere, and AI is this lift, shift, rift, or cliff. But here's the thing around technology and innovations. us as humans, we have a history of creating things that we struggle to contain as they potentially become destructive to our world. And whether it's irrigation and the effects on the desert, whether it's manufacturing and just in our operations and growth of our economy around the world and its effect on climate, or nuclear, right? Things can be put to good or bad. And so my talk really today is, this is a moment in time where we will define the kind of actors that we want to become as a society, but as individual companies. And I think you're going to see that this can become a differentiator. So let me show you some AI at work. This is a picture of my daughter. She rides horses. So I hacked together this algorithm that went under the covers to Facebook and looked at what Facebook was tagging. So every time you upload something to Facebook, they actually tag your photos with stuff like this: people smiling, the sky, it's sunny, building profiles, if you will, of the types of things that you're about and what you pose. And that is around privacy. And I'm not going to talk about that today. But I will tell you, from a privacy perspective, if you've heard me talk before, I always tell people, you're not the product, if you're not paying for it, you're not the product being sold, right? And more so, I would go on to say that you get what you pay for in this free world. And so I think there's going to be an emergence more than ever around privacy, or understanding the privacy rights that I'm giving up. But this is as much education as it is regulation. But that is not going to be the point of my talk. What I want to get at are the implicit biases that is behind our world, that when they find themselves into data, will find themselves into the AI algorithms. And we have to be proactive and not reactive to those kinds of things. So I'll show you an example. If I was to type in COVID nurses on Google and go look at what images show up, you're probably looking at around 5% of men as I scroll through these pictures. And that has a consequence. If you look at the issues around some facial recognition technology today, they were built on white men and women, mainly celebrities. And that has a consequence. That's bias. So let me show you another example. Here's English. I'm going to go translate to Swahili. Now, everything behind everything I'm showing you is AI, right? Those Google searchers are with AI indexing and natural language processing and image understanding behind the scenes. So if I type in something like, she is a doctor and he is a nurse, and then that's it in Swahili, then I bring it back to English, look what happens. She is a doctor and she is a nurse. Now, it used to say make the she doctor to he nurse. And Google came in and really started biasing the algorithm to stop that, but they haven't gone all the way, clearly. And I won't get into how these algorithms are built, but basically they index the world of written words, and that has been the breakthrough in translation. But even something like this, she is a serial killer. If I bring that back, it comes back to, well, that one actually he is a serial killer. So that's because so much is written about male serial killers. So much is written about female nurses. And not understanding that type of things within our AI will have an enormous consequence as we automate the world around AI. The picture of two people here. Well, here's the thing about these two people. They don't really exist. They're generated by what we call a generative adversarial network. So now I get lost in translation. Now I can generate faces on demand that don't exist. I'll go make one for you right now, actually. We'll just reload here, and you can see what came in here. It was generated by this kind of AI. And then on top of that, now AI can actually write like humans. And this is called deep faking. And there's this new technology called transformers. I won't get into what transformers are, but I thought I'd share with you a kind of cheeky transformer model that I was playing around with. So I came in here and I basically took Lee McGrath and I popped it into this algorithm. It ran for about an hour. And I just said she was convicted of stealing puppies. Of course, none of this is true, but let's go see. I generated this news. I pulled some real news and some fake news. And this, from here on in, is 100% AI. I didn't write a single word other than that stub. And so as I drill into this palsy news cycle, there's a picture of Lee. And well, okay, in Florida, she's been convicted of stealing 4 puppies, all pit bull mixes from PetSmart store in Tampa. According to Tampa Bay Times, Lee McGrath, 36, that's cool, was convicted on 5 counts of grand theft for luring 7 to 8-week-old puppies from PetSmart in December 2015. And the article reads like a real article. So this brings all kinds of concerns around how safe is our AI, and that is really what I'm going to take the next 20 minutes to talk to you about, because I was able to generate fake people. I was able to generate fake news. I was able to go and translate into any language in the world, which sounds incredible until you understand that it's what's written in the world is what's part of the translation engine. Well, how do we build risk algorithms for credit, for example? Bank managers who approved credit in the past get loaded in. And so I think when you take this together, and my mother and my father, they're both immigrants from Greece, well educated, but they hear AI and they shudder. And I try to tell my parents and anyone who will listen, the AI isn't these robots taking over the world, right? This isn't Terminator 3. What I'm scared about in AI is making autonomous or automation decisions based on untrustworthy or biased learnings. And that is the thing that I wanted to talk to you about. And then as you go on and hear about all these incredible automation stories and you figure out how do we apply AI into the next normal, right? So we can kind of grow the economy, we can sustain what comes to us in the future, get more and more efficient. This is going to be critical to decide what kind of AI actor are you going to be. And Gartner has some pretty foreshadowing commentary or predictions. They believe by 2022, that's a year away, folks, that 85% of AI projects will deliver erroneous outcomes because of bias in data or algorithms, or the teams responsible for managing them. And I'll talk about that in a moment. This is not just a gender inequality problem. It'll undermine the usefulness of AI. And I think you have this kind of merging event of AI and how business will continue and be efficient and how we'll grow economy with this type of automation intelligence with the very well immersion era of inclusivity and fairness. And so it's like this inflection point or perfect storm where good decisions and tough ones will have to be made. So as you'll hear about technology today, the one thing I want you to understand is accuracy alone is no longer enough. It's not that I'm 85% accurate. Fair use and trust will become a competitive advantage for your business. I always tell my daughter, you lose trust in buckets and you gain it in droplets. And we have seen bad actors. Facebook, Uber, they have been bad actors and got caught. And they try to say they're becoming better actors, and yet I look at some activity and I'm quite not sure. And I'm not trying to call them out. There's lots of like that. But I do believe this will be a differentiator in the same way that people talk about sustainability today. They will be talking about fair use, explainable, and trusted AI. And so with that, I want to give you a framework about how you will think about AI from fairness, robustness, explainability, and lineage. These 4 tenets will guide your AI decisions and who you choose to include in your supply chain, your value chain, and what services that you choose to deliver. So let's start with fairness. AI systems should use training data and models that are free of bias to avoid unfair treatment of certain groups. Now, no one's going to argue against that, but this individual, Dave Hansen, was the founder of this programming language called Ruby on Rails. So he's quite famous. Well, him and his wife applied for a Apple credit card. And as it turned out, they got the cards, but his credit was 20 times higher than his wife. Despite living in a community property state, a state where they filed joint tax returns, they've been married a long time, he actually has a worse credit history. And so something went awry there. And after he tweeted about this, many, many women and couples came out to talk about the exact same experience. Now, this card was underwritten by Goldman Sachs. And when you went to Goldman Sachs, you asked them, why is this happening? And they said, well, we hired this company to build the risk algorithm. They said, well, we don't use gender, so it can't be biased. And of course it can. Because there's all kinds of features, even first name or your shopping transaction history, which could make me guess with relative confidence if you were male or female. And of course, the headlines lit up with this, and they found themselves, Apple and Goldman, being investigated. And it wasn't that it was intentional, but it was unfair. And so when you think about loan processing, the one thing you have to think about is how stale are my algorithms? Look, the moment you put AI into play is the moment it gets out of date. And so we have to think about fairness indicators. For example, I want a fairness score of 100% on gender. And so the data comes in and you can see here, this is my algorithm losing it. I'm 13% at this point. My last reading was 11% below the threshold. So this is called data leak. And so we have to understand as new data comes in to process anything. And by the way, this is going to affect healthcare, you name it. So people always talk about getting the model into production. I'm not sure everyone's got on, that's when the work starts. And there's so much hype around AI, and I write about it all the time in the books. But this here, folks, this is the corner that people either don't know to look around or they're too scared to look around and see what they see. And so the takeaway I want you to think around here in bias and fairness is just because it's using an algorithm doesn't mean that it's fair or just, right? They can only learn from the data we give it. So that's a key takeaway point. So the next kind of quadrant is robustness. Now, AI should be ethically safe. That's kind of not the focus of what I'm talking about here, but that is in terms of AI in the military, and there is a great debate around facial recognition. I might touch on that at the end. But I actually want to introduce you to an area not a lot of people are thinking about. And safe and secure to adversaries who try to tamper or compromise the data or the algorithm. Now, why would they do that? Well, if business is going to be more and more instrumented with AI, then you can expect to see more and more attacks on the algorithms that support the business. In fact, during COVID, the amount of attacks on healthcare systems went up 30% for malware ransoms, right? Because that was a critical choke point. So as we become more and more dependent on AI, who's talking about their safety? And you know, the US government a year ago published a paper, and it actually said that hacking and cyber attacks were the biggest threat to the United States, bigger than nuclear war and terrorism. And so let me kind of frame this out for you for a bit. Like, when is a cat actually not a cat? And as it turns out, you can use techniques to change some pixels and change what award-winning algorithm thinks it's looking at, a Persian cat. And on the right, you can see it's about 98% certain I'm looking at a toaster. And you can't really get a good feel of what those things look like. And so I grabbed this here, and I'm going to actually attack this picture of a Siamese cat. So I'm using this technique called projected gradient descent. But even if I do a light attack, this is probably the one of the most powerful attacks, by just changing some of the pixels here, which you can barely see, right? You'll see a little bit of a change, right, in that cat's hair coarsification, if you will, or coloring. It now thinks it's a Siamese cat, and I can bring it all the way into thinking it's a basketball. Now, these are a type of ways to go and hack AI. And so you have to be on guard for that, and there's algorithms to be on guard for it. But the world is running so fast to say we're AI. How many people say their product is AI and there's no AI at all? And so these are kinds of the things you have to think about, robustness, and it has some consequences. You can fool things. So for example, facial recognition, you can see I'm identifying person one. In the red, it's about 50% accurate. This is a form of an adversarial attack, right? Now it drops down from person. When the person disappears, look at the red. Now it's about 11%. So it took 40% of the accuracy of that individual out. And so there's another way to attack. And we learned in Hong Kong, you started to see people with makeup on if you saw the protests and the unrest that was going on there last year. And what they were doing is, because in China, I mean, it's a free-for-all in terms of that type of visual recognition and tracking. They were fooling face recognition with makeup. And so there's different ways you can attack by breaking symmetry or creating asymmetry, concealing the nose bridge. These are all the things that these algorithms look for to identify who a human is. right? And so now that has some consequences. In this case, this was freedom of persecution from a government, very different. But this is an interesting case that came out of China where they fooled a Tesla in autopilot mode by painting a white dot on the floor or on the pavement. So you get the car going, they'll go and identify some white dots in the other lane to see if the computer vision could get hacked with this adversarial attack. Goes into auto drive mode, sees the white dot, and then the car takes a hard turn towards the dot, thinking that it's coming to the other side of the line. Now, Tesla came back and said, listen, this doesn't happen. They fixed this defect. But imagine now a terrorist attack starting to manipulate stop signs. I mean, the ultimate thing of terrorism is fear. So as we get more and more instrumented, being able to create these perturbations of our society to fool our AI will have an enormous impact. And what if I knew the algorithm that could spoof the system for a credit card? Or what about healthcare? Creating false diagnosis could be devastating emotionally to an individual. There's a form of being able to hack, if you will, a hospital that's treating patients. You won't be able to trust your diagnosis anymore, or overcharging or undercharging. And these can be done with what we call man-in-the-middle attacks, especially as if you look at the kind of dispersion of medical and imagery and sent around the world or around a country. Well, being able to hack into these images that are flowing between healthcare professionals could be devastating. And something even as simple as this. Now, this individual I made up from scratch, his picture, his name came from AI. Here's about me. Do you notice how I've highlighted military veteran, female diversity, like the kinds of things that AI algorithms that are sorting through resumes are looking for? This is a big piece that's going on in human resources today. Simply changing that text to white on my doc file, right? Saving my Word file, submitting my resume. Under the covers, that's the code you see there, are XML codes that won't show up anywhere, but if you're reading it, but I can assure you, you'll get through the first two levels of AI sorting that gets thousands of algorithms. So we really have to decide how robust are we going to be. And from an ethics position, it is about face recognition. I mean, if I look at Saks, they're probably got some of the world's most aggressive security and customer surveillance. Now, maybe in some ways this is good. If you're caught shoplifting at Saks and they catch you and they have you on camera, if you agree that you will be registered with your facial geometries that would identify you anywhere in the world, then they won't press charges. That's an interesting ethics dilemma. There's research that's showing with a plus of about 12%, so about 62 to 65% confidence that they can guess your sexual orientation based on the position or the features, the geometry features of your face, right? That's scary in terms of privacy or coming out of the closet if you're not ready, or more so where sexual orientation could be punishable by death or bias. So there's all kinds of things going on in the safeness here. And then finally, you can see I lit up this man in heat because we're going to now go into the world of the next normal where we'll start to do under the skin surveillance, like temperature, right? Obviously after COVID. So where does that line stop? Now, that wasn't the focus of this talk, but I do want to kind of put it into your minds. So two more areas we'll chat about in the last 10 minutes. One of them is explainability. Can I understood why you made the decision? Now, this is becoming a very, very tough thing to do. You saw it from Goldman Sachs. Nobody in Apple, Goldman Sachs, or the third party they used to help build the algorithm could explain it. And if you're close to AI and all these machine learning Olympics that people are winning in hackathons and stuff like that, you're using these techniques called boosted algorithms. And who cares what they are? Basically, boosted algorithms are when I take 10 really bad algorithms, we call them weak learners, and bring them together into one big complex mess. And they're impossible to untie. Furthermore, if you look at these low-code, no-code AI platforms, which I support, it's about getting AI everywhere, they generate their own data points. They might take your gender, mix it with your name, mix it with where you live, and make that as its own feature, code named by a number. So you could never, ever kind of understand those things. And so to gain trust in a model, we have to understand or interpret why it made a prediction. Like, look at this very aggressive cat jumping on this poor innocent kid and throwing it to the ground. Someone might say, well, that's a crazy cat. We better put that cat down. It's too aggressive. But the truth of the matter is this cat grew up with a toy, a little ball, that looked just like this snowsuit. And that's why whenever this little kid wears this snowsuit, well, the cat jumps on it. And so that's going to be fundamental to explain in credit, right? Why did I not get approved for this loan? So integrating AI into the day-to-day requires interpretability. And in a world where we're talking more about fairness, interpretability is going the other way. So I don't know how you can be fair if you can't understand. And this brings to me the problem of interpretability. Here's a simple algorithm, folks. This is a one-feature algorithm on how much does your house cost. I look at 1,000 square feet, 400K, 3,500 square feet, 1.4 mil. The feature, which is 1 square foot, is the explanation. Simple. This is a linear model. I could add in number of bathrooms, number of bedrooms, proximity to police station or proximity to fire station, and we would have 4 or 5 features. But the algorithms of today, like I said earlier, could have thousands of features. How do I unravel that? And, I like to show this dog trying to figure out how to get over the bridge. Like, what's going on in that dog's head? There's some math. He eventually figures it out. But he's running through all these different kinds of algorithms, right? And we need to be able to understand that logic. Maybe not for this dog, but we definitely need to understand it for things like credit. And some stuff doesn't matter, but maybe it does in this hyper-personalization world. So Netflix is renowned, obviously, for their algorithms. This is what they're suggesting I watch. Yep. And then this came up, and I was like, what? Fuller House? Are you kidding me? I didn't know if my daughter jumped on my Netflix and watched the reboot, or because John Stamos is Greek and I'm Greek. Not that I had a right to that explanation, but I wouldn't have minded that. If I understood that, I could say, don't recommend Fuller House anymore and take out my daughter's browsing patterns on my profile. So that's not a big thing, but a big thing are loans. And so when you think about fair credit, the University of Berkeley did a study and found that Latin and African Americans, their interest rates were 6 to 9 basis points higher. Now, just like you saw Goldman Sachs couldn't explain what was going on, there's an article in GDPR, and you're seeing many of the articles of GDPR coming to North America, the California Consumer Protection Act. You're seeing stuff emerge now in Canada. But in the GDPR Article 14 is this thing called the right to an explanation. So if I go and apply for credit online and you reject it, I have a right to know what were those features that rejected my credit. Now, so think about that. That's the law. And here we have one of the world's largest banks being able to, or telling me, we're not able to figure out why you got more credit, sir, versus your wife. So these are the things around explainability. And, if you know me, you know my daughter's into horses. I'm a horse guy. On the left, well, I don't want to be a horse person. It just turned out that way. But on the left, you can see the red part. That's the most identifying mark of what this visual image is getting classified by my algorithm. So here you can see the horse's head and the body. But look on the right at that horse. You see what's going on there? It's actually not the horse itself. That barn in the background and this tail, those are the key things that made that algorithm say a horse is a horse. So just because you have an algorithm at 96% identifying horses, the biasness in the picture on the right was that barn. And we see this all the time in computer vision apps. And so finally, lineage. They should have details of where the data came from, so I can audit and explain throughout their life cycle. I want you to think about it as your water system. And if you thought about it that way, then we would understand what we need to do. So data's coming in through some kind of data stream like open source technology called Kafka. Let's say it's water, minimally refined water ready for application through your garden hose. No problem. People tell you not to drink garden hose water. I drank it as a kid. Well, maybe I'm all right. You take water into your house and it goes through different services, a softening service, a heating service. It's ready for application. And my drinking water might go through reverse osmosis. And hey, I can mix the shower water with the drinking water, but I want to know where this came from. This data came from this particular branch, or 80% of our data is actually coming from lending houses that are within the Toronto region in an affluent neighborhood. And that will give me explanation into my algorithms. And so now as we use AI and go forward, we better have a diverse training set of data. When I showed you those kind of fake faces, right? What are they getting trained on? How do we have proper representation within our AI if our data isn't properly representing the diverse communities in which it's going to serve? And those are the corners that not everybody is looking around. And so I think you're going to see this emergence. You already have of these kind of AI model facts. So think of a nutrition label. On any AI I would consume, I would like to look at the nutrition label for that AI. So in this case on the right here, I can see how many epochs is how many times I trained it. We use 56 features to determine your credit score for an application under 5,000. I look at late payments. I can tell you the weightings. If you have an R3 on your credit, that is going to have a significant value. I can tell you time at your residence and time at employer have big particular impacts on the credit. And so if you said to someone, well, my time at residence has changed every year because I serve in the military and every 2 years I'm in a different location. If you had the right to explanation, then you could work with the AI and understand it. Here's a military veteran who's applying. They obviously don't have time of residence, and that would impact their score by 17%. So those are the kinds of things I think you're going to emerge. And so I guess I'll finish with this kind of last slide and advice. I work with lots of companies. I'll talk about regulatory compliance. And the thing about regulatory compliance for most people is it's the least possible work to comply. In other words, how do I not get fined? And the suggestion I'm going to give to you as you move forward in automation and you drive forward AI solutions and technology is think about the actor that you're going to be, and starting to make these decisions now and investments now, you can create regulatory dividends. Because trust me, in the next couple of years, you're going to have to explain this stuff, everything I've talked about. You're going to have to explain to auditors or regulators, but repurpose that knowledge and those insights for other use cases or benefits, like differentiating yourself in this new economy. So that's kind of my talk on ethics and AI, and now go apply this technology to automation. And the next speaker who I'd like to introduce is Anne Toner-Fung, who's the CEO of Innovation Guelph. And so you think about what's been going on there. And Anne, I was just there with Canada's first soccer World Cup goal scorer, Helen Stumbos, maybe last October and November. We were at the Spring Mill Distillery, who's owned by John Sleeman, if you remember the brand Sleeman. And they were talking to me about all the stuff that's going on there. So it's absolutely exciting to pass the next part of this talk over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I am absolutely delighted today to be introducing Karen Lai. So Karen is somebody that we've enjoyed working with at Innovation Guelph for several years. And she's the president and founder of KPM Power Inc. So KPM Power Inc. is a customizable lithium battery solutions provider with a specialization in battery management systems. And Karen is an ardent supporter of the advancement and implementation of clean technologies and is committed to fueling these initiatives to get to market. She's also passionate about encouraging and empowering more women in STEM, which is something we hold near and dear to our hearts as well, helping women realize their goals and fully realize their potential. Karen graduated from the University of Waterloo with a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering and holds the PEng designation. Her bootstrapped company, KPM Power Inc., has more than tripled their annual revenue since 2018. I am very proud and honored to introduce you, Karen, and now it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Hi, everybody. I'm going to just share my screen here. I'm going to talk about my bootstrapping journey. Just going to fix fix this here. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Lai, founder and sole owner of KPM Power. We are a clean tech company that specializes in UL certified customizable battery management systems. The battery management system is the control that collects voltage, temperature, and current from battery cells and packs and ensure it runs on its optimal performance. KPM's mission is to get more clean tech products to market, and I felt that the battery management system was the best way to do so. A little bit about me. I'm a mom of 2 kids. Peter's my husband who makes up the P, Maya is my daughter who makes up the M, and Parker is my son who completes our power. When people ask me what does KPM Power stand for, this gives you a glimpse of understanding who I am. I worked in industry for about 18 years and I started this company in May 2017. So before I start my story, I want to announce to everyone that I have a problem. I will admit that I'm either a 0 or 10 and I work until I pass out. Yes, I admit I am a workaholic. So this is a good segue into my bootstrapping journey. So what is bootstrapping? Bootstrapping means you're using your personal capital to fund your startup and you're continuing to invest into the growth internally from cash flow produced from the business. So basically, there are no external partners, no bosses trying to influence you. You're totally counting on yourself. Keys to bootstrapping. 1 is you need a good business plan. 2 is conviction. 3 is the ability and willingness to put your own money on the line. 4 is achieve cash flow positive. And 5 is reinvesting in the business. I want to share a little bit about my background. I never thought that I would ever be an entrepreneur. My dad always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I saw how my mom suffered in supporting his dreams by working a minimum wage job, raising 3 kids. His ventures were failure after failure. The house had multiple mortgages. My mom told us as kids that one is we should never have debt, and as women, we need to have our own finances and protect it. My parents' hope for me was that I would marry a good man, be a good mom and wife, and keep a steady job. That's all I needed to strive for. So I was able to check all those boxes until tragedy struck in 2011 when I found myself with a 2-year-old pregnant and 2 dying parents. My life was flipped upside down. So the only thing normal in my life was just all I had to do was keep that steady job. I remember telling my boss that I needed to leave every day at 3 o'clock and go to the hospital to take care of my parents with my 2-year-old. I guaranteed him that I will meet my sales targets and I didn't give him a choice. I just needed to do this and I would work shorter hours and close the deals in my pipelines. I kept this going for a few years after my parents passed, working shorter hours, taking care of my kids, and tripling the size of that business. Yes, I tripled the size of that business. So with this type of growth in a short time, taking care of my parents, taking care of my family, I didn't really have any time to take care of myself, and I experienced burnt out in 2016. That was the day that I quit via an angry text. So obviously my boss didn't want me to leave. I just tripled the size of the business, but I'm a workaholic, as I said, and every employer's dream is to have a worker be like this, where you just don't stop. But the challenge with that is they will pass out. So I needed to leave. I needed to quit. And my boss at that time decided to dangle a carrot in front of me and said, hey, how about we start another company? I will fund you and you can run this company. Sounded like a dream, right? Someone willing to give you money and you could run your own company. Well, this is the thing. As exciting as someone willing to give you money and run a company, there's a reason why I quit with that angry text, right? There's a reason why, that relationship had to end. So it took my husband one day saying to me, hey, why don't you do this yourself? And I said, are you crazy? Like, I don't want to spend our money. I want to spend his money. And my husband, who at that time worked at was in finance and working on Bay Street, said, you know what, instead of investing our money into stocks, I would rather invest it into you because I think we'd get a larger return. So this is how we started. So are you willing to put your own wealth on the line? How you manage your personal finances translates to how you manage your business finances. So Pete and I decided after our first child that we wanted to be financially independent by the time we were 45 years old. So that what that meant was we would not retire, but we wouldn't depend on the six-figure job to maintain our lifestyle so we could spend time with our family. So the way that we did this was we had to pay off our biggest debt, which was our mortgage. And another choice we made was we weren't going to upsize. So we stayed in our semi. I wasn't quite 40 years old when I sent that angry text, but at that time we were close in paying off our mortgage. So actually it was a very low risk for me to just quit like that. So that's just a really a great decision when I look back at it, why doing something like that. Here's a challenge with starting a small business is that banks don't lend to startups. I couldn't even get a $5,000 credit card. So now I don't have the bank giving me money. I don't have a person giving me money to start a company, even though I know them. It couldn't come to a agreement. So how am I going to get the startup going? The only one I can count on is myself. So what would it take for you to put your house on the line for the business? Even if you're not looking to bootstrap, you should always just ask yourself that question, because if you're not willing to put your own house on the line, how do you expect investors to risk themselves for you, right? So what do you need in order to do that? You would need, number one, a solid business plan. So here's the first draft of my first business plan. I'm an engineer, not a finance person. So all I did was list all my, expenses, and up to everything from pens and paper. Basically, it's your own money. So you have to be very strategic on how you're going to spend it, right? My business vision was always to get more clean tech products into market. And I couldn't do this on my own. I needed help. I needed to hire somebody. So on my first hires, I basically discussed a salary that that they didn't felt that they were struggling, that that I could afford. So we came to agreement on a salary. If you look at this, sales are all $0. I don't have any customers, so the only people that I can depend on are employees and suppliers. And the only way I can maintain that trust is to make sure I pay them. So that relationship is so critical when you start this business. So basically, the question is, how do I pay them? Because obviously there's $0. Um, here's a fun fact that many clean tech firms rely solely on grants and subsidy income, and they blow it on R&D with no focus on sustainable business model. When I entered this market, many eyes rolled. Is yet another clean tech company starting up? Lots of promise, no delivery is a reputation. So again, back to selling. What can I sell to generate sales without a product? I basically started selling my knowledge, my work ethic. I was a consultant. I wanted to help clean tech products get to market. Where would I sell my services? I sold it to clean tech companies that needed help. So I was able to start invoicing right in the beginning on May 2017. As a consultant, there's a limit on how much money you can make beyond a regular salary. I needed something else to grow the company faster. So as a start, I used my expertise in supply chain to work on a service model to help hardware startups get to market. I looked at supplying everything that goes into a lithium battery except for the cells. And my end goal was to supply the battery management system. So with this, it was a great entry to get to those type of companies. So tell me, how much does a bank like to see a balance sheet that has positive cash flow in the first year? How much does a bank like to see personal equity into a company? Money follows money. It's much easier to get loans at this point. The minute after year one, I reached out to BDC and I wanted to create a relationship with them. At this time, I didn't necessarily need their money. Again, I still have my own money that I could use, but I wanted to build this relationship when I didn't need it, because you never want to go to lenders when you're desperate. Conviction. So being a business owner is like a roller coaster, as everyone knows. You have a lot of ups and downs, a lot of downs. I go back to what really changed things for me was when I was selected for the fuel injection program at Innovation Guelph. It was $30,000 seed money along with mentorship. The seed money was great, but what I truly valued was the mentorship. As a business owner, I think the most important thing is to get out of your own ego. I really appreciated those facial expressions when I would come in with these crazy ideas. Some facial expressions gave me validations. Some facial expressions really made me rethink my idea. So they really taught me how to get out of my own comfort zone and do things that I would normally not do. And I would say their validation really helped my confidence. So here's a problem with being a consultant helping startups. They don't always pay you. So I am very grateful that my supply chain service was able to get me out of that. So, once the supply chain business took off, I was able to reinvest that money into R&D. We were able to broaden our battery management system to support various chemistries, not just lithium. We were able to create a platform that allowed us and our customers to commission systems remotely through a pandemic. So a pandemic hit, and now we cannot travel. So how do we get our BMSs running? Basically, we had to pivot and create this platform. In order to make money, we had to deliver. So now we can fully support a battery offsite. We also started some manufacturing in-house to help with our customization endeavors. So to sum up my bootstrapping journey, these are the key takeaways. One is a solid business plan. Would you bet your house on it? Getting loans when you don't need it. Start early and start small. Build a strong reputation. Take care of employees and suppliers first, when they will eventually take care of you during this journey. Good mentorship. Don't let your ego get in the way. 5, what can you sell? It's your business. How can you generate revenue quickly and open the doors for industry you want to enter? 6, conviction. Believe in your purpose. What is your most passionate about your purpose? What is stopping you? And 7, my last point is, again, I am a workaholic. I don't want to burn out in my own company. I don't want others to work like me either. So I purposely put a core value of work-life balance to force myself and our employees to stop and take care of ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Karen. Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Stark, and I'm the Manager of Business Retention and Expansion at the WindsorEssex Economic Development Corporation. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Andrea Descargar. With over several years in the waste management industry, Andrea has played a progressive role pushing automotive manufacturers to rethink recycling. Andrea is an entrepreneur and is the Sales and Business Development Manager at Green City Plastics in Windsor. She has had the opportunity to work with most major small to large size plants and waste management facilities throughout Ontario and the US, all in the pursuit of creating a closed loop waste system in support of a circular economy. She developed the Zero Waste Initiative recycling program, which helped manufacturers divert over 10 million pounds of plastic waste from the landfill to new streams. As a sustainability advocate, she educates the average consumer on low waste options through her own brand, Ecovana. Andrea, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it is a pleasure to be speaking amongst some of the great entrepreneurs sharing their journey today. My name is Andrea Descargar from Green City Plastics, and I will be sharing how we built a plastic reprocessing company from the ground up, along with some of the biggest obstacles we face and how we have overcome them. A little bit about myself. I am 30 years old. I just turned 30 in February, and I have failed so many times in the past with other ventures. And fortunately, I've been able to establish 2 successful startups, one in event planning and staffing, and my most recent venture, Ecovana, an e-commerce product-based company aimed at reducing plastic waste for the average consumer. I've worked in almost every industry and have no post-secondary knowledge relating to what I do now. I do have a very ambitious personality, and I always like to think, how can we create something out of nothing, which is exactly what we did at Green City Plastics. So what does Green City Plastics even do? What is plastic reprocessing? At Green City Plastics, we shred, grind, and find homes for industrial plastic waste. We specialize in serving the automotive industry. So we'll shred materials such as car bumpers, interior parts, defective taillights, and big jewels of plastic molds from mold companies and trial facilities. So this is actually what our final product looks like. This comes from a variety of automotive plastics that are first separated at our facility, placed on a conveyor system, and then shred in our 2 process machines. So for 7 years now, we've served the automotive industry. However, we've recently opened up the doors to recycle agriculture waste in 2020. And we're now looking at the possibilities of extending our recycling facility to car batteries and e-waste with the growing demand in battery-powered vehicles. When we first started, and when I say we, it was Michael Basha, our CEO, and I, we didn't realize exactly what we were getting into, nor do I think anyone really has that answer when you're working with any startup. Michael had prior experience in the plastic waste industry, and I had 0. We were both on the fence of what we really wanted to accomplish in school, but we always did think outside of the box. I was working a few hourly wage jobs at the time while tiptoeing in business, in the business field or e-commerce. And I recall the day Michael poked at the idea of getting this shredder and a place to start grinding in 2013. It took us about a year to really get things going. And I mean, we couldn't even find a warehouse with the proper setup. That was one of the biggest challenges. We also needed the power to run the machines, and we didn't even know where to even find a machine exactly. So there were so many unanswered questions that we had at the time, but all we knew is that there was a lot of potential in recycling, and we just were going to figure out how exactly we were going to do that. So we dedicated a year of just learning the market. We set up like mock emails, like a little mock business, and we would kind of reach out to other companies and kind of learn our way through there. We educated ourselves on the basics of the plastic industry. We're still learning to this day. And we pictured having this thriving plastic reprocessing company in the heart of Oldcastle to come see with a growing team. So that obviously didn't go as planned in our first couple of years. We started off with $300,000 of funding. It came from personal loans, lines of credits, mortgages taken out on real estate. So we spent about $100,000 of our own money on just the machines, importing fees, lawyer fees, all the fun stuff that you can imagine that goes along with starting a manufacturing company. So we did this with no investors or grants at the time. And in summary, we were just 2 really ambitious people who figured everything out on the way down. So in the very beginning, it was exciting. We were so excited. We were like, okay, cool. Like, what are we going to do here? We have this great idea. Now, how do we even do this? It's a lot easier said than done. And our accountant actually connected us with a lawyer who had owned the perfect building. When I say building, this warehouse, our first warehouse, was like in shambles when we first got it. There was like mold everywhere. We did the renovations ourselves, of course, funding everything ourselves. There was a leaky roof. There was grass probably as tall as myself. So we took care of a lot of the cosmetics because it sat vacant for 3 years prior to us moving in. So we found the machine in Michigan, we brought it in, and we thought it would be as easy as pie as just simply setting this machine up and shredding. In a perfect world, that would be the case. But we learned the hard way that cheap is expensive. So that was our biggest lesson learned. And we went with an electrician that was going to do the job at the lowest price possible. It took a year and a half to get the machines fully installed with wiring adjustments to the building for power service. $45,000 later, and a year and a half with no income, our warehouse had stockpiled materials of plastic that we had brought in. The only thing that was working in this building, the only machine that we had was this $900 baler we got at a Sears auction in London. So we just sorted and baled material for the first 2 years of business. We weren't fully operating because of the obstacles that we had with setting up the machinery. So while Michael focused on the machines and getting the shop ready, my role was to bring in the business and material. So for someone who picked up odd jobs in customer service, I have previous experience in the financial consulting, and I did door-to-door hot water tank sales when I was 18, and I applied that confidence and experience going into cold markets and prospecting large manufacturers. If anyone's ever done cold calling sales, I applaud you. It is like one of the most mentally challenging things that you could do, but I am so grateful for all of the opportunities that I had growing up with those roles, because it's really prepared me for all of the things that I face today. So I had this big list of suppliers I would call throughout North America. Again, had no idea what I'm doing. I actually have a quarter of the list with me today. There's like a list of all these suppliers. I would go down, highlight who picked up my call, just kind of like my CRM from scratch, really, that's what it was. And I would even like drive locally around plants, just seeing if they had bins of plastic outside. So, and if they did, I would introduce myself with a flyer advertising our process. It was this flyer that I had created from Vistaprint, and I would go around saying, okay, well, we have like a bin service. We'd party with a third-party bin service to do this for us. And we would just go around saying, how could we help them reduce costs on their waste? So that was really big, because I remember the first time I ever walked into the first prospective company, I had to like scream in my car because I was so nervous. I've never done this before. It was kind of very intimidating seeing this big building and a fully established shop. So I went in there, and people did give me the chance to hear me out, and I did kind of scoop up some warm leads, but it kind of really led me nowhere for quite some time, but I didn't give up. So I'd say that's the biggest mental challenge, is just having to show up every day and not being afraid of rejection. It was worth it though, because it's like a numbers game. For every 9 rejections, there was 1 yes. It was all worth it, even if I didn't land them as a supplier, as I had really hoped to get them. It did help me build up my experience and confidence that helped me grow to who I am as a professional today. So I think it's safe to say I've seen all that there is to see in Ontario when it comes to waste management facilities. And any plastic manufacturing company out there, I've probably been there. And maybe if they didn't let me in, I'd probably see what they have outside. I would drive place to place, and I remember in the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing. So there was a gentleman I came across, and he said he had plastic. I'm like, okay, great. Like, this is potential supply for us. So when I get there, he has this tin can of like plastic dust. And I was like, okay, great. How much of this stuff do you have? He's like, I have 1,000 pounds of this material like every couple months. Mind you, our minimum requirement of waste to bring in for the cost, for the numbers to make sense, is about 20,000 pounds of plastic waste per load coming in. So I obviously do things a lot more differently now. I started off having the mentality that we needed the suppliers more than they needed us. But over time, they really do need us more than we need them, because we're providing them a solution, and we go above and beyond the average recycler and waste management company. So that's also a reflection of how we valued ourselves, I guess, at the time, In the beginning, we didn't really, because we said yes to everything. So we were the house of yes. We would take in all this plastic garbage, not knowing how to even manage it. We just thought, hey, someone's giving us some sort of supply. Let's pay for it, bring it in and like shred it. So again, we had no clue what we were doing at the time. And the second biggest obstacle we faced was after the machine was up and running, after a year and a half to 2 years of no income, stockpiling all this material, we failed to consider the contamination and how this would impact productivity. I was able to find a supplier that provided these large barrels of, they used to have oil in them. It was a pharmaceutical company. So it would come off of this truck, about 323 barrels, and I was obviously general labor too, helping with that. And by the time we got it in our shredder, it would take like an hour or so to bounce up. It just didn't work for us. Same with metal contamination on clips of interior parts. I remember it was myself, Michael, and his 3 other brothers. Everyone would come in when they did have time to help us like remove this, the plastic metal clips. We were using like flat screwdrivers to remove these things initially, but of course we don't do that today. So we're in a lot better position now to have, we have a better system set up where we have 3 magnets throughout the process, reducing metal contamination for the end user. So something like this, obviously doesn't have any more metal or any of the contamination that we may have missed by manually trying to remove some metal parts from there. Our third obstacle was one of was a big one. It almost made us quit because we had no choice. We were draining our funds with no income coming in, and our first experience of selling material was to a buyer who didn't pay his invoice. So it was a very big invoice. It was a big deal to us at the time, and we didn't have the proper insurance set up in order to collect that money from that customer. Nor did we have the funds for a lawyer to go after this guy who has our money. Everything went downhill at year 4. So we worked so hard. We got in the machines. We got the warehouse. We renovated it. We did all of these things, and we really tried our best, but we were somehow kicked out of our warehouse, and the only things we managed to take with us was our 2 machines. We were completely tapped out of funds at this point, and we were ready to give up. I was considering going back to school. Michael was doing the same, considering selling off the machines to at least get money back from that. So we were going to give up, but within 2 months of time, right before we were about to sell everything off, we had a partner connect with us, providing the capital to cover operating costs. He also has 30 years of experience in the plastic industry to give us the boost that we needed. So despite all of our obstacles, we were in a better place with an efficient production system and a growing team. We now have 14 employees, and we just added 3 new machine processes to help us process all different other types of material instead of just focusing on one and having to shut that down to clean it up to process other materials. So yeah, we went through a lot. It's been 7 long years, and in the beginning, money was the motive. The nature of our business is getting paid per pound on plastic material that comes and goes. And as time goes by, like the idea of how much money that you can be making off of something really loses its value. You have to ask yourself, am I really happy? Why am I really in this? Where is my purpose here? Is it just like another job? But when you grow so passionate and confident in what you do, everything just falls into place from there. I remember dragging my feet and really asking myself, like, why am I even in this? I could be going to school. I could have a career. I could, be doing something completely different. So I never looked back, but I guess I failed to see the bigger picture of what we were really going to accomplish for not only the environment, but for Windsor. I realized that waste management was just a big numbers game for other established recyclers. I strongly felt that there was a lack of concern over the environment, and that's when everything changed for me. I noticed that I feel like there was a bunch of other people in this business that were just so desensitized to like seeing mountains of garbage. And if the numbers didn't make sense, then of course, as a business, you just don't move forward from there. But I was really disgusted by all of this waste just being burned and landfilled. So from there, my passion really grew. There were large companies throwing plastic, like mountains of plastic on a weekly basis. And it was disturbing to see so much potential. There's so much potential in this material that could be diverted into new waste streams. So I just thought of like, okay, there's a huge problem here that no one else is, like everyone's just overlooking this. There has to be a better solution to this. So that's kind of where we niched down. So we're different than any other plastic reprocessing company that I'm aware of, because we truly care about the environment and have hopes that technology will enhance to divert almost 100% of all of the waste into new streams and products. We go above and beyond and educate our suppliers on the golden opportunity in waste. And we really need to change that mentality of calling it scrapped plastics, is what everyone calls it, and really look at it as a valuable commodity towards creating future products. Landfilling and incinerating plastics that are not sortable should not be the answer or an option at all. And as a woman in business, there are negative connotations you confront, and it's all about how you keep pushing forward despite stereotypes. There also isn't many women in waste management. Often when I go to these sites to do my initial waste inspection, I walk around with my clipboard and people think I'm like an auditor or someone just auditing them, when really I'm there to kind of give them a full proposal and show them the value in their waste. It's a male-dominated business, and any entrepreneurs how mentally challenging it is to overcome rejection. And as a minority, young and female entrepreneur, it has been very discouraging at times in this industry where you just want to give up. But going into this, there wasn't a leg up, and you're literally working from ground up to build your brand and make a name for yourself. Fortunately, being in Windsor with available programs and events, networking has contributed greatly to our growth and the support of women's programs. When the odds are stacked against you, take another route, break down another wall of opportunity, and continue to just focus on providing value for your customer. So even when I work so hard on a proposal for these large companies, and for some reason, even though we're doing the right thing, you just got to keep pushing forward, and you'll attract the right audience, and who knows, they may come back like a year from now, which has happened before in the past, where I prospected a company for about 3 years. They didn't give me a chance then, all the other times that I followed up, but they did come back afterwards. So it's really awesome to see that hard work really goes to show, and just being very persistent and professional with that. So it's been a pleasure to share my story today, and I hope I have been able to provide value and inspiration to other women entrepreneurs to pursue careers, or anyone that's looking to start a business in waste management and manufacturing. Our overnight success has almost been 8 years in the making, and we will continue to grow through new opportunities while incorporating innovative technologies to decrease the levels of waste in North America. I will be handing it off to the next speaker.
Hi, thank you, Andrea, and really thank you for sharing your passion and your journey with us today. My name is Linda Horowitz, and I'm a program manager for Scale Up and SME programming at Innovation Guelph. And I'm honored to be here to introduce Madison Guy, the CEO of Grant Me Educational Consulting Incorporated, located in Vancouver. To pay her way through the University of British Columbia, where she captained the women's soccer team, Madison went through an exhausting process of finding and applying for grants and scholarships for herself. So in 2018, she launched Grant Me to help other students find funding. And as of 2020, Grant Me has connected students to over $3 million in Canadian scholarships. Madison also won the 2020 CANI National Youth Impact Icon Award and most recently was named one of Forbes magazine's top 30 under 30. So over to you, Madison.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Linda. Can you guys hear me okay? Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm just going to share my screen here. Give me 1 second. Awesome. So hopefully you guys can see my screen here. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Linda, for the warm intro. Super excited to be on here and sharing my story. And this is really what I'm going to talk about today, is really my journey building GrantMe from the start to where we are today, and actually walking you guys through it year by year, and some of the wins, some of the challenges, and you know, where we're going next. So just to start by giving a little introduction of me, Linda already did this, but my name is Madison Guy. I'm the founder and COO of GrantMe. And I actually went to UBC as a student and captained the UBC women's soccer team to a national championship in 2015, which is probably the highlight of my entire undergrad journey. But going back even further than that, when I got to UBC, I was attending UBC on a small soccer scholarship, which was covering some of my tuition. But when I got there, I was almost immediately hit with a $20,000 bill. And really hadn't looked at how I was going to pay for that, and hadn't really created a financial plan for myself. I was fortunate that I definitely had the support of my parents, but that being said, obviously $20,000 over 4 or 5 years is very expensive. And so really quickly, I had to get really resourceful in how I was going to pay for my education. And I figured out pretty quickly that there was tons of funding available to me, but it could be incredibly challenging for students to navigate those funding options. So I went through that process myself, as Linda said, the exhaustive process of finding awards that I could be applying for. And I ended up winning close to $50,000 in scholarships, which paid for my entire education. But bigger than that, it allowed me to graduate without any debt. And so the story of GrantMe goes back to my last semester at UBC. I finished my soccer season. So for those of you that are familiar with university athletics, basically the soccer season runs from like September to December. I had finished my last soccer season and I had a semester left. So I had like 3 classes. But soccer, just as a student athlete, it takes up like 40 or 50 hours of your week, right? It's more than a full-time job. So suddenly I had all this time freed up. And I was like, what am I going to do with all this time that I suddenly have? And so that was when I came up with the idea of supporting other students in finding and applying for different awards. And at this time, it really was just an idea. There was no, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Okay. There was really no business, right? Like I hadn't thought that it could be a business. It was really like, I solved my own problem this way. I wonder if I can help other student athletes to do the same. So I started GrantMe in my last semester at age 22. I'm 26 now. And we'll actually go back to 2017 and take a look at what that journey was actually like. Oops. So how I got my first paying customer. So I always like reflect back on this and I'm like, this is just like one of those wild startup stories that like you hear about, but you don't think are actually real. But like looking back at like what I did in 2017, it's like crazy to think about how crazy I was. So getting my first customer. So really what the process looked like was I had this idea probably in February was when I actually took action on it, and I still had the 3 courses that I had left, and I was like, I wonder how I can like create awareness around the money that's available to students. So I got my brother to help build me like a little free website, and basically I decided that I was going to go to all 600 student athletes at UBC and convince them that I could support them with applying for scholarships. And what I did was I went to all the coaches of the teams at UBC and said, hey, I'll buy you guys pizza if you're willing to sit down and listen to me talk about scholarships? And the coaches were like, absolutely, because we don't have enough funding for our teams. So if you can help with that, that's great. So I basically ended up presenting to about 1,500 students at UBC from like February to April. 600 student athletes, and the other 900 students were from sororities and fraternities who I had no direct connection with, but I basically just like offered them pizza and said, will you let me talk? And the overwhelming answer was usually yes, because what I figured out really quickly was that not only was this something that students were interested in, but also they were going into massive, massive debt. And the average student was graduating with over $26,000 of debt. So I was in these regular conversations with students and even parents that were saying my son or my daughter is already in $20,000, $30,000 of debt, and they're only in their second year. And so right away there was no product, but I knew I had product market fit in the sense that I knew that this was like a very clear need for families and for students specifically. So so what I did out of those presentations was I would match I would like take their information down manually. I would match them to you know, different awards that I had found for myself already. And then I would individually sit down, and this happened throughout that summer. So around April, all the way through to August, I would individually sit down with each of those students and I would walk them through the application process. So I ended up sitting with over 300 students that summer, one-on-one, walking them through the application process for different awards that were available. And again, at the time, it was like more of a consultation with no actual technology built. But I really wanted to understand like what do customers need, like what do students want, and then figure out the technology component of it. So I did that over a summer, and I think I got into the summer and I was like, you know, there's like clearly a need here. I could apply for like my first full-time job, but I think I'm just gonna like see this through to the end of the summer. And if I can make any money to like sustain myself, then I'm gonna keep going. And so at the end of that summer, I ended up making like, it was crazy. It was like $70,000 or something like that. And I was like, wow, like this is more than I probably would have made in an entry-level job that I took. And so I started going through that process into the fall as well. So that was how I got my first paying customer. It was super scrappy. Like I said, it's like those startup stories you hear about. And I was literally just standing in front of whoever I could get in front of to be like, I think I can help you. And I was really fortunate that I had a group of UBC students that were very receptive to that. So that was how I got my first paying customer. And so, like I said, that was like, it was just me at the time, about like $70,000 in revenue, I think in 2017, which convinced me this could be my full-time job. And I just need to figure out like what to do next. So 2018 was really the year of leveraging no-code automation to get to 300K in revenue. And there's a bit of a formula that I think we still use at Grant.me that we've figured out, and that has allowed us to bootstrap and not yet raise any capital. So the first thing is like we figured out a lot of different pieces of software that we could really like piece together and leverage to make things work for either free or for a very, very low cost. So the first thing that we did was we figured out Zapier. So I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with it, but it basically like automates a bunch of web applications. You can put them together and it's like a no-code solution to like automating or zapping software together. So we figured that out. We use other softwares like Trello so that I could actually store essays and applications, and a zap would be sent through to basically for me to be able to look at each application. And at that point, it was still completely manual. But that's when we started exploring like how could we build this into a platform and what could that platform look like? And by we, I just mean like me, my mom, and my partner, Jason, who's now the CEO at Grant.me. So we started thinking about how could we build the first version of a platform so that we can really leverage technology to bring this to students across Canada at scale. And so we went around to companies that, you know, basically build like web apps or mobile applications. And we were getting quoted like $80,000 to $100,000 to build the first version. Obviously, that was very expensive given that I didn't yet know what the platform would look like or what we needed it to do. So we ended up finding a friend of our family's that he was like a referee in the WHL, but he knew how to build web applications. And so for $6,000, we built like the first version of this web application that would automatically match students to the different scholarship opportunities that are available. So we did that, and we did it for only $6,000, which was really great for us. And then we figured out our paid acquisition strategy. So I literally took like courses in Facebook ads, Google marketing. I did all of that stuff, SEO, all of that stuff. And we basically figured out a paid acquisition strategy. And I think we were lucky in the sense that we were dealing with students. So it was a lot easier to acquire a customer via, Facebook, Instagram, Google. And then I contracted my mom to help with the workload. She was my first, she was like my first contractor. She wasn't my first full-time employee, but she was my first contractor. And she was really helping me to manage all these different applications that we were supporting with students. So that was our first full year in business. And that really got us to, to the next year, which is when I actually hired my first full-time employee. So I hired Erica in 2019. And I remember this being like such a big decision because I think I had so much, not stress, but just concerns with like employing somebody full time and knowing that like I'm paying for their life. That was like a big jump for me. And so I hired Erica, who was actually a friend of mine since elementary school. That's a picture of us actually working through problems, very stressed, I think. But I hired Erica, and she was our first full-time hire. And then I hired a bunch of contractors. And I think that was a great formula for us to get to like literally to scale to $1 million in revenue in 2019, because it was like low commitment, low risk, right? So we could take bets on individual contractors or companies that we could contract. And it was very low risk because we knew that if it didn't work, we could, end the contract and figure out the next step. So those were two of the things that I did in 2019. And then the other big thing that we did was we hired students straight off our platform. So we started to get a ton of traction with students. And because our platform was so rich in data, we really learned who are the best and brightest students across Canada, and can we hire them? So a really good example of that is a student named Ari, who now works here full time. He's 20 years old. He's leading our enrollment team and is like directly responsible for our entire revenue. But he's a student that came through us and we hired for a summer internship, and then he just continued on with us. So we basically created our own recruiting pipeline of students, and that really supported our growth. So that was 2019, and then 2020 last year was really like all about scaling up. And I think the biggest, that's a picture of me working through different problems. But I think the biggest thing that we learned in 2020 was like really making sure that one of our core values was student obsession. So investing in our product and our technology to be able to serve more students and to serve them better. And that was a big focus for us. Once we figured out the revenue model, we were really able to focus on investing back in our technology and in our product, and then hiring some really smart and hungry people to support that growth. And I think like in terms of like my own development as a leader, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is like we at GrantMe need to have folks on our team that have like relentless work ethic and that have very high performance expectations of themselves. And I think so much of where we've got to up till this point has been like we really have like a team, like high performance team culture, and that stems from my experience as a high performance athlete, I think. And we also have a lot of athletes on our team. But I think if you can set really clear expectations for people and they can strive and reach for those very high performance expectations, then that's what's going to lead you to success. And as long as you find people that ideally are smarter than you, which so much of my team is, then that's going to be your biggest, really your biggest support and your biggest way to continue to grow. So 2020 was like a huge year of like learning about people, how to manage people, how to find the best people, how do you attract and recruit A players and top talent, especially at a company that hasn't raised any capital. So making sure that you can find and attract talent, even though you're kind of under the radar in terms of press and not having raised any money. So I think that was a really big challenge for us in 2020. And I think we had to get, really resourceful as a team and figuring out like, how do we find those people, and how do we bring them here, and how do we share our mission in such a compelling way that people want to join us on this journey and on what we call here the rocket ship. So that was really what 2020 looked like for us. And in all of these pictures, you see me smiling, but it definitely has been similar to, I think, what Andrea had said, like there's so many challenges that come along the way that you have to navigate as a leader, and you have to take responsibility for and accountability for as a leader. And that's been a huge learning for me, especially as such a young founder and a female founder as well. So 2021. So 2021, we're really excited about where we're going. We have over 50 people on our team who, again, are all like super smart and super talented, and I'm just like forever grateful for. And we won Forbes 30 under 30, which was a huge win, I think, for the team. And it's really a testament to the incredible work that they've been able to do. And we really see ourselves as Canada's leading technology-enabled education consulting platform. And the biggest transition that we've made is we really started as a scholarship company. Now we want to be the one-stop shop for students to access scholarships, admission support, and internship and job opportunities. And our mission has really transformed to accelerating a student's journey to their dream career, and making sure that students have access to the opportunities they need to get to their dream career without going into massive, massive debt. And so that's really been our focus in 2021. And yeah, we're still bootstrapping, but and which, by the way, has been like a big challenge in itself. But we have a path forward, and we're really excited about the work that we're doing this year, and ultimately what we're building for students and what we're building for what we think is Canada's next generation of young leaders. So yeah, so that's really a little bit about the story and what the journey has looked like for me. And I think if there's like one thing that I would do to like conclude this conversation, but also the journey, I really think there's often two types of people. And this is actually something I saw on Twitter from somebody that I look up to, Nick Huber. And he said there's two types of people who want to learn everything there is to know about something before they give it a shot. So they rarely, if ever, actually shoot. And then there's the people who figure it out as they go, and they take a lot of shots, and they hit sometimes, they fail other times, but they keep going. And there's relentless pursuit of execution and continuing down the path that they started. And I think if you wanted to summarize what GrantMe is, it's really a bunch of people who are just figuring it out as they go. We take a lot of shots. Sometimes we aim for like a 70% hit rate, and sometimes we miss, and we're okay with that, but we keep going. And if you can do that, then I really believe that anybody can build a business, anybody can start something, but you have to have like relentless pursuit of your mission, and you have to be able to just like figure it out as you go, and you have to be able to fail, come back, and try again. And it's like on a daily basis, you're in that battle, and that's something that you have to be comfortable with. And the biggest thing is really the perceived risk is usually greater than the actual risk, like 99% of the time, right? So I think often with entrepreneurs and people that want to start businesses, they associate that with so much risk. And I think for me, like the biggest thing was like, I know I can go get a job, and probably the risk that I think there isn't actually as big as what it actually is, and the impact of me failing at this isn't actually as bad as I'm perceiving it, right? So if you can really look at the risk, but then understand like how to mitigate it and understand that it's probably not as big of a risk as you thought it was, then you can probably go and build something really great. And I think, you know, I've been so fortunate to be able to surround myself with people, other entrepreneurs, advisors, and really our team that have really like oriented themselves around figuring it out, taking shots, hitting sometimes, missing, and then starting all over again the next day. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I would leave with everybody, and I think the biggest thing for Grant, me, and our journey. But I really appreciate you guys hearing my hearing my story and my journey. I put my email down there as well if you guys have any questions at all. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to me, and I really appreciate it.
What a journey. Thank you so much, Madison, for sharing that with us. Hello, I'm Catherine Laycock, a program manager at Innovation Guelph. And I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Pooja Viswanathan today, the CEO of Braze Mobility. Her doctoral and postdoctoral research in robotics and assistive technology, along with her passion to improve accessibility and independence for people with physical disabilities, have spurred on her work with smart wheelchair technology for over a decade. Pooja is an expert in knowledge translation and commercialization and acts as a consultant to many Canadian networks and organizations. She has received awards and scholarships from several prestigious organizations in Canada and the US, including Google. When she's not working, she's climbing, teaching music, playing racket sports, or solving escape rooms. Over to you, Pooja.
Thanks so much, Catherine. I'm just gonna share my slides here. All right, so thank you so much today for this opportunity. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my brazen journey of inventing smart wheelchairs, and I'm going to take you through the journey of mine from research all the way to market. So before I talk to you about the problem, let me show you the problem. This is a documentary style video taken by Dr. Ben Mortensen as part of his PhD dissertation. And in this video, you'll see Richard, who is an experienced power wheelchair user in Vancouver, and he tells us that he hates going to the grocery store because of this. Now, this was an unintentional capture of a real life incident, and you can imagine the embarrassment and loss of dignity that an accident like this might cause. But Richard's not alone. According to a report, approximately 20% of power wheelchair users experience at least one major collision within a year, and 11% of these users are hospitalized. Now, accidents like these often lead to exclusion from the use of power wheelchairs altogether, even when no other alternative for independent mobility exists. And so this problem led me on a decade-long journey in search of a solution. So this brings me to the start of my journey, which is my research as a PhD student at the University of British Columbia. I was in the computer science department. My PhD was in assistive technology and robotics, and was very, very focused on what we call smart wheelchairs. So before I get into the details of my research, I want to talk a little bit about the methodology. And this is a very common methodology that you see in sort of most computer science or engineering research projects, whether it's master's or PhD thesis. So you start off defining the problem. And so in our case, the problem here was older adults in long-term care settings who were slumped over in these manual wheelchairs that they couldn't self-propel because they didn't have the strength to. And they weren't being allowed to use power wheelchairs because of the safety concerns I mentioned. Also, majority of long-term care residents have dementia. And so that often also led to more safety concerns where they were often thought to not be able to drive power wheelchairs safely. So we defined the problem. This was my grand plan. So I was going to build a solution. And in this case, a bunch of computer scientists and engineers decided that the best solution here, since the problem was accidents, was to build a chair that would automatically stop if it detected an obstacle. And so that would prevent collisions. And so that was naturally the right solution. And so what you see here is a stereo vision camera that's attached to the front of the chair that was responsible for detecting obstacles. And then I built a whole system to avoid collisions, as well as offer wayfinding prompts to the user. Because the intended users were individuals with dementia, we also figured that they would likely need some support in getting from point A to point B as well. So I also had a wayfinding system built into it. The next step would be to test the solution. Here's just an example of the sort of control environment that we were going to test in. And then, of course, the last step for any research student, as many will know, is publish or perish. So the grand plan was to publish everything. All right, so from here, I'm going to talk about my actual journey and sort of how it all panned out. So I started my PhD in 2006, and by 2010, I had built the system that you see here. And so we were detecting obstacles using stereo vision to be able to create maps of the environment so that we could essentially figure out where the chair was, where it needed to be, and offer these adaptive audio prompts to the user. So you can see it took me 4 years to build this system. And then in 2011, I basically got around to testing the system. And I actually tested it with 6 older adults who were long-term care residents with mild to moderate cognitive impairment. And this was the test. So I built this really convoluted maze, and the users had to start at one end of the maze, which you see sort of in the far end there. That was the starting point. And they had to come all the way out into sort of the bottom left corner there, which is where a stop sign was. And that was the end of the maze. And so they had to come all the way around, and we had laid out obstacles all along the way that they had to maneuver. All right, so these were the results. I'll just show you really a snapshot of some of the results here. These are 6 participants, and on the y-axis, what you're seeing here is the number of collisions that the participants had. On the top, it's kind of sectioned off. So what you're seeing is that the first and the last phases there was the baseline. So this is where no system was activated. And in the middle is the phase where we had our anti-collision system activated. And so half the participants did the baseline phase first, and the other half did the baseline phase second, so that we weren't seeing any effects of ordering, for example. So what we saw here, and what you can see here, is that the collisions were decreased in the phase where the anti-collision system was activated. And this was actually statistically significant for a couple of the participants. Now, we also saw similar results in terms of wayfinding performance. So we also measured how, what the distance was that people were traveling to the end of the maze. And once again, we found some of the participants had much shorter routes to the, took much shorter routes to the goal when the wayfinding prompts were activated. So this was all great. This was published in my dissertation and a couple of publications. But there were a lot of lessons I learned along the way. So I'll go through some of them here. The first thing I learned as a computer scientist, we tend to be very quantitative. And so my entire dissertation really looked at things like safety and very quantitative data. And what I realized was that numbers don't tell the whole story. Because sort of towards the end of the study, I actually started talking to people more and sort of documenting some of their more qualitative feedback, which was really, really insightful in terms of how people were actually experiencing the technology, which, in some sense was perhaps even more important in terms of understanding what the adoption of this technology would be. One of the big mistakes that I made here, as I showed you in my timeline, was I spent 4 years, and this is not unlike a lot of projects that happen like this. It was 4 years of developing this technology before I had my first engagement with my intended user. Oftentimes, you'll actually see research projects in computer science labs that don't even necessarily test with end users. A lot of it ends up being with able-bodied users or in simulation. And so this was really important, but when you do test with end users, you can also end up with struggles in terms of getting ethics approval. So these are all a lot of barriers that often lead to developers of academic projects like this not really getting around to getting user feedback until much later on. And so as a result, when I finished the study, I got all this fantastic feedback but I didn't really have the time to incorporate it back into my PhD because I was done. You know, I was out of funding. They wanted me to graduate. I was close to finishing up my dissertation. And so the big question for me was, and it's kind of scary, is where do I go from here? And so what I realized was, you know, the next step here would be either myself or someone else taking this project on. Otherwise, this was just going to be yet another research project that just sat in the lab somewhere and never really made it out into the real world. And so this was really scary. And so I decided I wasn't quite done yet, but I decided I was going to change up a few things. So I came back to Toronto for my postdoctoral fellowship, this time at the University of Toronto and the Toronto Rehab Institute. And I took an approach called integrated knowledge translation. And so I decided that this time I was going to take a more transdisciplinary approach and also a much more iterative approach. So you saw my model earlier, my process earlier. I changed things up a little bit. And so we're still working on the same problem here, but instead of building the solution, kind of working 4 years or more on the technology, instead I used rapid prototyping techniques to quickly iterate on various different technologies and get feedback from users in a much more sort of time efficient manner. One of the tools that I actually used as part of this was called the Wizard of Oz methodology. For those of you who aren't familiar with Wizard of Oz, I like to think of it as fake it till you make it. And so the idea is that, you know, you can fake the technology in some sense, sort of simulate it, and then the users experience it as though it were the real technology. So in our case, we mocked the different types of interventions or control strategies that we wanted our smart wheelchair to take. But we did that through a remote control that a researcher that was standing behind the participant would operate. And so the person in the chair wasn't really, you know, didn't really understand that this was a simulation. They actually thought that it was the chair that was actually doing these things. And so in that way, we were able to get a lot of really great feedback. And unlike my previous work, which was mainly quantitative, this study was actually mainly qualitative, which was a huge departure from me given my background. So I actually had to take additional qualitative interviewing courses and learn those techniques. But I really felt that this was really important in understanding what the user's acceptance and what their needs and preferences were for how they wanted a system like this to help them. So again, not surprisingly, I published, and this time I published in a lot more journals, with it being more transdisciplinary, and not only was publishing in computer science and engineering journals, but also in the rehab space, so in disability and rehab as well. So this was all great, but I was still nowhere closer to really understanding. We had a lot of mixed reactions in the study, still really didn't understand who was going to be using the system, you know, whether this was actually ever going to be adopted, and more importantly, who was going to pay for technology like this. And so I figured I still wasn't done. And so from here, I decided to host a workshop. So I got a grant from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, and along with a colleague of mine, Dr. Rosalie Wang, we ran this workshop called Smart Wheelchairs and Assessment and Training, so SWAT for short. And we were specifically looking at how we could use the smart wheelchair technology, and not just the technology, but also the data throughout the training and assessment process, because we learned that a lot of clinicians who were training individuals and providing this technology to individuals had very limited support and tools to help them with the process. And so we explored that. We brought people from all over the world working on smart wheelchairs and really just trying to figure out, why hasn't there been a technology out there that's commercially available? So people came in from 6 different countries. We had clinicians, we had clinical researchers, and developers, both from university and industry. We sat and brainstormed in a room for a day and a half, and we had all sorts of really interesting findings that you can find in the position paper that I have there in the link. Of course, one of the main findings there was the idea of the valley of death, which is very familiar to a lot of academics, and you know, this unfortunate reality that a lot of research prototypes really don't go past that prototype stage, and really die in this valley. And so after this workshop, for me, it was really a decision point. I'd really been struggling with figuring out how I was going to solve the problem that I initially set out to solve. and I needed to make a decision. And I realized, especially through this research, that there were a lot of conflicting objectives of academics versus those in industry. And not that it should necessarily be that way, but I wasn't seeing a path forward in academia. And so I realized that this, for me, had to be a change, and I had to jump and sort of, move into industry while still maintaining close connections with academia. But this was the point where I really decided that it was time to start my own company. All right, so I made this decision, but it was a really scary decision, and I knew absolutely nothing about starting a company. I'd been an academic for over a decade. And so I was, like, where do I even start? So luckily for me, being in a kind of a bit of a hot spot really for entrepreneurship, I was surrounded by accelerators and incubators. I was part of the University of Toronto's accelerators, one of them called Impact Center. And this was just a really, really great place to be. I went out and networked with a lot of startup founders and advisors. I think we heard that from a lot of the other speakers today, because it really does create that support system that you need when you're starting off, where you don't have the highest confidence when you start and you don't know what you need to do. And just hearing from other founders that it's okay and that you can figure things out along the way was fantastic. One of the other things that I also started very closely looking at was where the gaps were. So as someone who had done a lot of research in a lab that was predominantly sort of software lab, I recognized that if I was going to build this technology, I needed more hardware expertise, I needed more design expertise. And so I started slowly filling those gaps. Again, being part of a university meant that I had access to a lot of talent through internships that were often subsidized by the government. So this was really a great way to start and to fill those some of those gaps. Now, the timing was also great for me. It was just around the time where AgeWell had been funded by the federal government. It was a $36 million network for aging and technology. And then Ontario Brain Institute also gave me my first check of $50,000 as a neuropreneur. And this gave me sort of a starting point really to explore what I needed to do to get this technology to solve the problem that I'd set out to solve. And so I started off by doing a lot of stakeholder interviews. And so I spoke to end users, I spoke to families, I actually created some of my own events because there weren't a lot of accessibility events that were happening in town. So really just took every opportunity to talk to everyone I could and really understand what the market needed and wanted. And so here's what I learned. So after all that research around, partially autonomous or fully autonomous wheelchairs, what I learned was that our users really wanted to stay in control. They did not like the idea of a wheelchair taking control over, how they could drive. Adaptability and customizability in the technology itself was really important. Every single one of our customers is different, and they needed the technology to be able to adapt. Affordability was really important, as was payment flexibility. A lot of our customers have limited, monthly income, and while this sort of technology can create a lot of value, things like monthly installments would actually really help. The most important lesson, though, that I think I learned from all this is how important it is to actually go into the user's natural environment. And by that, I mean their home, the communities they go to, their training sessions, as well as getting to know their circle of care. It's kind of embarrassing to accept now, but after almost a decade of research, I had never actually visited the home of a target user. And so we typically, as researchers, would invite wheelchair users into the lab to run our experiments. And so I never got to see people's homes. And it was a huge eye-opener for me when I first went into some potential customers' home and realized the sort of property damage that is often a huge challenge especially when driving a power mobility device. You'd see ripped up baseboards and dinged up doorways, and that actually really sort of pointed me on the right path in terms of the technology we were then going to develop. And so I made a huge pivot and ended up creating the technology, which is what we have today. And so at Braze, we commercialized the world's first blind spot sensors for wheelchairs. And I'll show you a quick video here And in terms of, what the product does, it restores dignity and independence back to the driver, reduces caregiver burden and stress, decreases property damage, like I mentioned, and increases safety not only for the user, but others in the environment as well. So here's a quick video of how the technology works. So the system can be installed on any wheelchair and transforms it into a smart wheelchair. This affordable system provides feedback to the user regarding location and proximity of obstacles through intuitive lights, sounds, and vibrations. All right. So the mobility aids market is over $1 billion, and our entrance market is nearly 4 million wheelchair users in North America, up to 91% of whom can benefit from smart wheelchairs, according to researchers at the US Department of Veterans Affairs. In terms of what we've already accomplished, we've already filed patents in North America, Europe, and Asia. We have vast connections to clinicians who are gatekeepers of assistive technology. Our system adapts to the varying abilities of our users at no additional manufacturing cost to us. And we've also got strong traction with several stakeholders in the space. So we launched commercially last February, and to date, we've generated over $130,000 in revenue. We've sold over 100 units, with our main customer being the US Department of Veterans Affairs. So the VA has featured us in their national newsletter. We've sold to over 6 VA hospitals now, and we're currently collaborating with 2 of the largest blind rehab centers in the VA, which are also the biggest centers in the United States. So during COVID, we doubled down on digital marketing, virtual demos. We onboarded some of the top manufacturers' reps with established VA relationships in 37 states. We also set ourselves up for growth outside the VA by partnering with the largest dealers in the US and Canada, giving us access to over 70% market share and over 700 reps across the US. So these are all commission-based reps. So obviously we, they get money when we get a sale. In terms of the team that I have today, so this is my co-founder, Dr. Alex Mihalaides. Many of you in Canada will recognize him as the co-scientific director of AgeWell. He's a world leader in technology and aging and has published over 150 peer-reviewed articles in the field. We also have Terrence Ho, who has led customer experience strategy at Bombardier and assistive technology companies, and is a family caregiver to his brother, who uses a power wheelchair. We very recently onboarded Alan Boyd, a veteran in the industry who has helped bring other similar products to market and has actually helped them exit successfully to the largest wheelchair manufacturer in the US. And of course, we have wheelchair users on our team who help drive our innovation forward. Now, it takes a village to raise a startup, and so we wouldn't be where we are today without the support of several organizations that you see here in Canada and the US. Through all of them, we've raised over $1 million, mostly in non-dilutive financing. And so that means I haven't had to give up equity in the company for most of our financing. And we're just getting started. So later this year, we'll start rolling out our data analytics platform, which will revolutionize wheelchair training and assessment, and eventually help us build more accessible cities through smart mobility. So really excited about this. And so I just want to close now by sharing a story. And this really is a personal success story for me, because it kind of closes the loop on where I started in long-term care, where we were fighting the problem of undue exclusion from power mobility use. So this is David Watson. He'd been using a power wheelchair for many years, but 2 years ago, staff was about to take his power wheelchair, his only means of independent mobility, away from him. So you see David here drives in a tilted position and often can't see what's around him, which meant that he was having accidents, and staff was concerned and felt they needed to make a choice: David's autonomy or the safety of everyone in the home. This is David, just a few months ago, still driving his power wheelchair. With our blind spot sensors, David has independent mobility and dignity. Staff can support his autonomy without compromising on safety. David's friend and advocate has peace of mind. because we at Braze believe that mobility is a fundamental human right, not a privilege. In terms of our impact, not only is Braze building products here in Canada, generating revenue and creating jobs, we're helping change attitudes and policies around accessibility, and that's what we're most proud of. Our mission at Braze is to help millions of wheelchair users around the world navigate boldly, independently, and safely. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Pooja. That was really amazing. We really enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing all of your tips and tricks, but also the journey. What a great story. And I just want to thank you so much. It is my pleasure now to introduce our last of the lineup of women entrepreneurs. Nancy Campana is the president of Nouveau Event Planning. It was established in 1988 with the creation of an annual wedding extravaganza show. This show created an opportunity for consumers to connect with wedding businesses. So taking engaged couples and putting them together with businesses. Nouveau Event Planning is the longest established producer of wedding shows in Canada. And 2020 was scheduled to be the largest year ever for Nouveau Event Planning, with other corporate planned events. Nancy is going to talk today about how her company moved, adjusted, and used adaptive principles and technologies for business solutions to stay current and to keep going. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Lee. Welcome, everyone. Well, what a great lineup that I have to follow. So many young entrepreneurial women who business is based on technology. And my business is so far from the other end of the spectrum. I plan wedding shows and corporate parties and large events. And so technology is obviously something I've had to learn and use along the way for social media marketing and promoting events. But my business is not based at all on technology. My background is fashion merchandising. I'm a graduate of Fanshawe College, and not long after graduating from college and working in retail, I started a very small fashion styling and cosmetic consulting business. And I wasn't long into that business when I wanted to get into a wedding show here locally in Windsor, and there was no such thing. So I started developing the first wedding extravaganza show. And something when I heard everyone else talking about the financial help they got or the loans they got along the way, the first loan I've ever taken was the past year when the Canadian government offered loans to businesses that had been completely closed down due to COVID. So I've been all self-financed from the beginning. In 1988, I started financing my first show by selling the booths in that show. And any profit that was made after the first show was a win. And so 1988 was the first year of my wedding show production. It was a January show called the Wedding Extravaganza Show. And my sole purpose at that time for opening a business was I was newly married and I did want to have children. So I'm the classic story of the woman that opened a business because I wanted to work around the hours that I could dictate that I wanted to work versus being dictated by an employer to come in at specific times. I wanted to raise children, but I also wanted to work, and I wanted to work on my terms. I grew my business while raising 3 children. I had a husband who was extremely supportive, and he went part-time after our second child was born. He was able to job share at work, and that helped freed me up a little bit more in the office. And the wedding show business grew from one hall at the Caboto Club here in Windsor, which is about 60,000 square feet, to in 2020, the last year we produced the show, to overtaking the entire Caboto Club. So 2 floors, 6 different reception halls, and one of the largest shows in Canada. From there, the wedding show started growing into customers coming to me and asking me to plan corporate events for them. So that was the next step in growing my business. I went from wedding show production to starting to plan corporate events. And then a second wedding show a year, which was the fall wedding event. And I had the opportunity during this time, I was approached by someone in Chatham, Ontario, that owned the website name weddingshows.com. And so I quickly purchased that after some negotiation. Something to remember, over the course of that first decade, I didn't have a computer when I first started this business. I took computers at Fanshawe College, and we sat in a classroom without computers and learned about megabytes and gigabytes, and really never any hands-on computer experience. So once I did get a computer in the office, that was all self-taught. The very first magazine we produced in conjunction with our wedding show, there was no graphic programs on the computer. So I worked with an ad agency, and the printer would typeset everything back then. And so I would be running back and forth with hand scribbled ads that customers would give me. And the amount of work alone just in producing a magazine that we put in bags at the show, it was a tremendous amount of work and time. One of the things that I really noted over the course of the last number of speakers is everyone seemed to talk about at some point challenges. And after being in business for 34 years, challenges in business and my personal life is something that unfortunately is not unfamiliar to me. In 2004, after having our third child, and my youngest was 5 years old, my husband suffered a heart attack. And he was young, he was 43 years old, and I have to say, that rocked my world. I depended on him, like I say, to kind of co-parent with me. He took summers off, and I lived in fear that I would be raising 3 children and trying to run a business on my own. Fortunately, my husband did get great care, and he turned 60 a few weeks ago and is living a healthy life. So that was the very, I would say, first personal challenge I faced. My business continued growing over the years, and in 2011, I lost my brother who lived out west to suicide. I'm one of 5 children. My brother was a black sheep of the family who I had remained very close to, and he had no executor and no one to take care, no will, no one to take care of the follow-up that has to happen after a sudden death. And so I was that person that took care of that for a year, on top of trying to run a business that was growing and extremely busy at the time. And it was an exhausting and emotionally exhausting task to take care of while running a business. And you have to remember that the event planning industry is a very high intensity business. We often hear about people planning their child's wedding and how exhausted they are. And I was up to doing maybe 20 to 25 very large scale events a year. Not long after settling my brother's estate, which took a record time of about a year, and feeling some peace, a month and a half later, we got a call. Our son, Rocky, who was living in Toronto, had attempted to take his life. And 2 days later, he passed away. I never thought I would face a bigger challenge than that. And I really, really haven't faced a bigger challenge in life than losing a son that we adored, and who himself was extremely business smart. And I depended on him a lot to throw ideas off of. He had just graduated from the Ivy Business School and was hired by Procter & Gamble. And the loss of losing Rocky was extremely traumatic. And I had an event to do a week after Rocky passed away, and I had our fall wedding show 3 weeks after Rocky passed away. And this is an industry that doesn't stop. You have a one-time chance to do an event. It was at that time that I brought in an employee in who had been working part-time with me as a full-time employee. She was planning on moving to Toronto after taking the same course I had taken at Fanshawe, but asked if I needed help. And I hired her as a full-time employee, and she was instrumental in helping me get through this period in life. During this period, I also was able to start a not-for-profit with Windsor Pride called the Run for Rocky Legacy Project. Rocky was gay, and we were not able to donate his organs, and he was also a huge advocate of gay-straight alliances that were starting in Canada at the time. So we began working with Windsor Pride and started a division of Windsor Pride called the Run for Rocky Legacy Project, in which we first of all petitioned the government of Canada to change organ donation rules, as well as ran an event called the Run for Rocky, where in 5 years we were able to raise $370,000 to support gay-straight alliances in secondary schools and post-secondary schools here in Windsor. And it's the only funding model of its kind in Canada to support gay-straight alliances. I always had work to fall back on through these tragedies, but I can tell you, as young business entrepreneurs, you should expect that life is going to throw you these curves. No matter how well your business is doing, life will throw you personal curves, and it's persistent that needs, it's your persistent that you started with at the beginning that will continue to keep propelling you forward through life. So in 2020, when I am at the most senior part of my career, and once again, business is going along very, very well. 2020 was going to be one of the biggest years in my career as far as producing events. Our wedding show was in January was sold out. We didn't have a booth we could sold. It was our highest revenue producing show that we had. And we had many corporate events on the books. Vistaprint is one of our clients here in Windsor, and I do 4 annual events for their employees. And they had added a 5th to my plate because it was a big anniversary year for them. And Diving Canada was coming to Windsor for the Championship of Diving one weekend in May. And then the Olympic trials for diving were going to be held in Windsor, and I had that account. Green Shield, Windsor Mold all had events booked with me. Devonshire Mall and Tecumseh Mall are continuous clients that we do events for. So it was going to be a big year. We got through the wedding show in January, and I was reading a lot about what was happening on the COVID front, and I started to become a little fearful. And when I talked to other people about it, my staff, my husband, they were like, oh, you don't have to worry about that. About 3 weeks before the shutdown on March 13th, I said to my staff, I want you to back up everything on your hard drives, take them home in case you have to work from home. And they kind of looked at me like I was a little crazy, but I was preparing. And on March 13th, which is a Friday, after the NBA closed their season, many concerts were being canceled, and the event industry was officially shut down by the Ontario government. And I knew at that time it was not going to be a short shutdown. I was anticipating and predicting 2 years before large gatherings would happen again. And the large gathering industry, when we talk large gatherings, we're talking festivals, concerts, trade shows, consumer shows. we all depend on a lot of people coming to one place at one time. And by far, you know, we read about the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, the hotel industry being the most affected, but truly it is the large gathering industry that is by far the most affected. We have been closed down and we cannot do physical events with large gatherings, even in the green zone of restrictions. So it will not be until the pandemic is over that we will be able to do events. On top of the fact that wedding shows could no longer be produced, and the wedding show is by far my major revenue producer, all of my customers who I depend on were also being affected. So the home show producer here in Windsor, of course, was affected as well. But when he gets back up and running, the home improvement business, even the boat business for boat shows, have not been affected. They've actually gone the other way. They have soared during COVID, home improvement and boat sales. My customer hasn't been able to do business. So there seem to be so many roadblocks for me. And after 34 years of business, the thought crossed my mind, do I just close down and walk away? I've had so many challenges through 34 years of business. Is this the time to close down and walk away? But at 60 years old, which I just turned, and 34 years of investment into my company, my company was worth something. And I still felt, I was still planning on a good 5 years of going hard at it because I loved what I did. And obviously there's also a retirement investment in my company because it is saleable. And on March 13th, I had to wonder if I'd ever have anything to sell after 34 years of investing time in my business. So there was a definite period of grief for me. And the grief was harder than any grief in a lot of ways that I had been through before, because I always had my office to go to. I always had work to bury myself in. Like our first speaker said, many of us entrepreneurs can immerse ourselves in our work to the point of being workaholics when we want to, if we don't put those restrictions of work-life balance on ourselves. So after going to my office for many, many days, many weeks, and trying to solve problems, because that's what event planners do, we solve problems. I felt lost. I felt that there really wasn't a solution. For the first time in my life, there might not be a solution. And it also occurred to me that since grade 5, I had never had a summer off. I started in grade 6, babysitting, and I threw up my hands and I said, I'm just going to keep posting on social media, which I did from day one. I kept promoting my vendors on social media, on Instagram and Wedding Shows Windsor on Facebook. I tried to keep supporting my customers who had supported me all the years that I've been in business, because I knew for them, this was very difficult. They were even smaller businesses than me in most cases. So besides doing that, I said, I'm just going to throw up my hands and I'm going to try to enjoy summer. And I started bike riding, and some days I would bike ride 30, 35 kilometers. And it was during that time of, I would say, grief that my creative juices started flowing again. And I started the phase opened up here in WindsorEssex where small weddings could take place. So it was 50 indoors, 100 outdoors. And within that 2-month period, everything changed. In late July, August, and September, weddings started happening. And I knew right away, the wedding industry was not dead. People were going to get married, but weddings were going to look very different. So I decided to do an experiment, and I reached out to my vendors and I said, for $100, if you want to give me flyers, I will get them in a gift bag. We will do the promotion we always do for our fall wedding show, but we will distribute gift bags out at Devonshire Mall to anyone registers who registers to pick one up through our website. Our registration is our lead list, and it's vital not only to me, but it's vital to my customers. And I thought, well, we'll see if there's any pent-up demand. We were able to register, and this was something I put together very quickly. In 3 weeks, 350 couples that wanted a gift bag, and most of them showed up at Devonshire Mall on the weekend, and they picked up that gift bag. I was able to talk to every single one of those customers, which I normally can't do at a wedding show because I'm running in 50 different directions. And the gratitude these couples had for what we were doing, on top of the loss they were feeling because they couldn't go to a wedding show and they didn't know how to plan a wedding. They were tired of being on computers. And they were just grateful. They were lost in trying to plan their wedding, and they needed help. And so that is when I made a bigger plan for January, and I knew my website had to be overhauled. And I reached out to both the Windsor Economic Development Commission, Lee, here in Windsor, as well as WeTech, Yvonne Pilon. And I was picking both of their brains to see, what do you think? And there was the Women's Entrepreneur Grant available. So I did apply for that. And once again, you're scared to spend money when you don't think you're going to be working for another 2 years. I knew what my burn rate was in the business, and the fact that I was able to get that grant for technology is what really propelled me forward to get moving and let's see if I can do this. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'm going to show you. Can everyone see that? So what we did was I came up with a whole new plan. My website no longer.
We can't. I'm not seeing your screen.
You're not seeing it, Lee? Okay. Thank you. Let me just get out of it. Okay, I'll walk through with you what we did. First of all, I had been on virtual trade shows again for months trying to find what would work. And I'm a member of the Bridal Show Producers Association. And there was a number of American wedding show producers, large wedding show producers, that tried to produce virtual consumer wedding shows, and they were huge failures, and they had invested a lot of money into them. So I knew that wasn't working for my American counterparts, and there's no reason with their large population basis it would work here in Windsor, Essex. I was finding myself that I was getting a lot of benefit out of being on any conferences that had a lot of condensed content in a short amount of time. And so I came up with the idea of a number of things. The first thing was we do a gift bag again in January, but it would be larger. It would have some amazing gifts, and it would be of value. So the value on the gift bag ended up being over $800 that we gave out in January. We registered 652 couples to pick it up, compared to 535 couples that had come registered for the show the year before. Mind you, we had a major snowstorm that weekend, but it was very comparable to some of our bigger shows. I also created a loyalty program. So any vendor that wanted to buy at the level of the loyalty program, when customers spent or booked with them, they would turn in the receipts to us, and they would get a gift, a larger gift from us. And secondly, we also overhauled our shop online page. So our directory listing was overhauled, and we are now selling weekly our directory listings, because we have become the largest resource for a shop online directory here in the region. And it's working. There's fields where our customers can upload discounts and specials. And weddings are going to happen this season. And once we get to the orange level, a lot of these couples are going to be planning their weddings, their last minute details very, very quickly. They're holding off to see how many people they're going to be able to have, and then they're going to start planning all their last minute details. So through the registration, we've been able to do really a great job with helping our vendors, who are extremely grateful to us for doing that, and been able to continue on with doing business. Our revenue is not the same, but we know that when we're able to do shows again, we'll be able to get up and running very, very quickly with doing a show. And now we have the support of added vehicles and things that we can sell to our customers, so that we are the marketing agency basically in this region to connect wedding couples with wedding businesses. So I just want to emphasize through the end of this to persevere. You are going to have challenges. There's no doubt. I can tell you, after 34 years in business, there is going to be challenges in your business. As young entrepreneurs, as women, you can do this. Persevere and always keep your eye on the reason you got into doing what you're doing, and that's probably the love for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy, for really amazing, inspiring story. We certainly wish you a strong COVID recovery soon. Now to echo Irek's opening remarks, we just heard 5 very convincing stories that show why Canada needs more women entrepreneurs. We also heard that finding and securing investment is a challenging task for growing companies. I've been with IRAP for 17 years, and I can concur with that. Securing investment is a major roadblock particularly for smaller Canadian companies that are developing and commercializing new technologies. It's a great honor and pleasure to introduce our closing keynote speaker, who will shed some light on how to tackle this challenge. Bruce Croxon made his mark as a digital pioneer by co-founding LavaLife. He grew this early tech startup into the marquee brand in online dating with over 2 million users, 600 employees, and just under 100 million revenues. Since the sale of LavaLife, Bruce has been active as an investor and advisor in growth stage companies in the tech sector. As an ex-Dragon on CBC's Dragon's Den, he added a broad range of businesses to his portfolio that tapped into his passion for digital media, health, and marketing. Croxon currently helms Round 13, a company dedicated to investment in growth stage Canadian tech companies. He also co-hosts The Disruptors on BNN and CTV, a weekly show spotlighting Canadian business. I'm certainly really looking forward to this next talk. Welcome, Bruce Croxon.
Yeah, thanks, Vladimir. Listen, I got to say up front that I am accustomed to doing, or I was pre-COVID, accustomed to do a fair number of talks to groups like this. And, you know, it was in person. And just the way things got scheduled, I didn't really get the opportunity to listen to too many of the, you know, the preceding keynotes in a typical event. One of the advantages of virtual is, you know, I was able to do some things off the side of my desk and listen to every presenter here today. And I got to say, I just have to start by, of course, thanking the conference for having me in the first place. You've got your choice of a lot of different speakers, I'm sure. So I am motivated to leave something of value. Before I do, though, I just want to pay homage, if I can, to the incredible and inspirational stories that I heard today, each and every one of them. Nancy, if you don't mind, I'll single you out as the last one. You know, you let us know that you're 60. You've been around the ecosystem for a while. I'm 60 as well. The difference is I look at you don't. But as I hear your story, what resonates so loudly with me is the perseverance and what you've had to endure to continue building your business in the face of the losses and challenges you've faced. To me, that's the epitome of stick-to-itness and entrepreneurship. I'm sure that the work that came from the tragedy involving Rocky and yourself is unbelievably appreciated in the communities that need that kind of support the most. And if I can be of any help in that regard, please reach out to me. It's Bruce at Round 13 Capital. I'm happy to help in any way I can. And, you know, just on the back of that story, you know, in your journey, it may be a good time to remind everybody on the call, we're entrepreneurs. I feel so at home with you guys, the entrepreneurs in the group, because we all share this. It's kind of crazy, you know, what it is that we've chosen to do with our lives. And some of these stories just underline it, right? The hardship and the pain. And don't ever make the mistake of adding up the amount of time you spend growing something, you know, with how much is appearing in your bank account, because it will bring tears to your eyes. But it may be useful just to remind everybody that things go in cycles. And one of the advantages of being around as long as I have is I've seen a few of them, right? And they're called cycles for a reason. It means that they come around again. And what that means for us as entrepreneurs is, listen, when things are going really well, and for some businesses in COVID, that is the case. And pre-COVID, certainly that is the case. When things are going really well, don't hang on to that feeling too hard, because it ain't gonna last. You know, anyone that tells you that their business is growing up to the right without any hiccups or roller coasters is not giving you the straight goods. And if you hang on to that feeling too hard, the crash, the inevitable crash becomes traumatic, right? So just know that challenges are gonna come, you're gonna have to face them all the time. Similarly, if you're at the bottom of a cycle, Nancy, I again refer to your story, you know, events got shut down. When are they ever coming back? Oh my God, how devastating is that? Things move in cycles, okay? And if you continue to surround yourself with the right people and doing the right things and having your bike rides and finding your energy elsewhere to get through it, this too shall pass and you will come off the bottom. And I have no doubt that your last years of business are going to be successful. And again, I make the offer one more time. If I can be of any help to you in that journey, reach out. So I think we're running a little bit over time on the day, so I'm going to talk fast. There are some things that I want to pass on, which I hope you find helpful. I'll give you a little bit of a background on me. Thanks for the introduction, Vladimir. I am a lifelong entrepreneur. I'm the son of an immigrant who was an entrepreneur, showed up with $40 and a grade 8 education, and he got to work. So I was inspired early about what could be done from a startup stage. I've remained committed to that all my life. I will say, before I sort of fill in a few more of the blanks, that, you know, I have been around the ecosystem a long time. And I will say that as we sit today, I don't think it's ever been a better time to start a small business in Canada. I've always believed Canada's the best country in the world to grow a business. That hasn't changed. But what is happening today is that there's been a coming together, if you will, of more experience from the entrepreneurial ecosystem. The big banks are more willing than they've ever been in my career to back young technology companies. And back to Paul's point at his opening keynote, every company is a technology company or on their way to being one. So that's good news. The government has been very supportive in terms of funds and allowing immigrants into the country. And funds like Round 13 and other venture capital funds are hungry. And there's been a lot of capital raised and a lot of support that's ready to be given. So, you know, I've been around it a while. I've seen the dry times, I've seen the good times, and this is amongst the best times that I've ever seen to grow a business. Now we'll talk a little bit about how you do that, but that's, I thought it was important to mention that up front. So just, very quickly through my story, lifelong entrepreneur, the biggest success I had was the company Lava Life, arguably one of the first social media / dating companies in the world, frankly. We did sell to a public company in 2004. The result was very public. It was a $180 million exit. That attracted Dragon's Den. They called me and said, look, the brand's big. Would you like to be on this TV show? I said, not really. They said, well, come down to audition for it. You might find you like it more than you think. I'd never seen the show before I went down, did an audition. It went well, ended up spending 3 years on that show. I've got some stories from it, a couple of which that are relevant. I'll tell you as this talk goes on. And coming out of that, I saw a tremendous opportunity to back growth stage technology companies in Canada, and got together with one of my investors from the Lava Life days, who I become friends with, and we saw the world the same way, and we went out and started raising money to put into Canadian companies. And I'm really happy to say that Round 13 today is one of the biggest technology funds in the country. We've got just under $800 million under management, focused almost entirely on companies in this great country of Canada. It is, again, I've said it off the top, it's the best country. We've got the best engineers in the world. We've got second and third time entrepreneurs now starting to come along to provide mentorship and early stage dollars. And again, you can see by the quality of young entrepreneur and young women entrepreneur that we've heard from today, that we're in really, really good shape as the generations come up behind, sort of the grizzled veterans like myself. So I'm very happy and excited about that. So Lava Life, an interesting story. Started in the late 80s. We were using telephone lines to connect people that wanted to meet each other. Unfortunately, in that 15-year overnight success story that was Lava Life, I can't say that I came out of it a relationship expert. I'm far from that. Ask anybody that knows me. But I did pick up a few tips on how to grow a business. And I think some of them actually are still very, very relevant today, because as I look back on the mistakes that I've made in my career, and I call it my 51-49 rule. I mean, I've done 51% of the things right for the 49% of the times that I've messed it up. And that net 2 has enabled me to continue to move forward and I guess, call myself a successful entrepreneur. But some of the things I learned at Lava that I think are applicable here is, listen, you have to take the time, no matter what you're doing and as busy as you are, you have to take the time to look ahead and figure out where it is that you're trying to go. Now that time period has come down a little bit, given how quickly things are moving today. Back in my day, it was a 5-year plan. I would suggest it's 18 months. Where do I want to be 18 months from now? That forms the basis of a vision. And without it, you're really just stuck with doing your best every year. It's very tough to get goals that make any sense. And there's lots of literature. Don't take it from me. I could give you lots of Lava Life examples about how that was effective for us, but we don't have time today. But don't take my word for it. There's tons of literature on the difference between small companies that are trying to grow just by waking up at the start of each fiscal year saying, well, let's try and beat last year, versus the ones that are saying, no, we're trying to get here in 18 months, 24 months. Here's exactly what we need to achieve this year in order to propel our way to the 24-month vision. It's like night and day. So performance management, knowing where you're going. The biggest single issue as I look back on my career, and I'm so happy to see the references almost all of the speakers made to this today, it has to do with the core values of the people that you put around you. As I look back on my career, the biggest mistakes that I've made, and they are mistakes in the millions of dollars in terms of losses and lost opportunity and lost revenue, they are all to do when I've ignored my internal compass on the core values that I thought were most important for building whatever company it is that I was involved with. So I'll give you an example. In Lava Life, 2 of our 5 core values were teamwork and open-mindedness. Teamwork, because listen, I come from a place where I'm quite cognizant of the fact that I don't have close to all the answers, and heaven forbid I show up pretending I do, or let my ego get in the way of good decision making. And I've seen that happen over and over again, where people can't, it's funny, we're talking about a conference led by women here, and it's mostly, I mostly see the behavior in men, right? Where their ego gets in the way of a good logical counterpoint to something they may have put their heart and soul in or believed with all their might, and it's ego, right? So the absence of ego is very important for teamwork. Introspection, Madison talked about earlier on about the number of teammates she has in her company that are smarter than her. Thank goodness they're smarter than me. There is somebody that's captained a soccer team, knows how important it is to surround herself with people that have skills that she doesn't. And I'm seeing very few examples of people with outsized egos or 100% conviction that they have all the answers succeeding, particularly in this time when so much data is coming at us so quickly. There is no one person that has all the answers. Second value at Lava Life that stuck with me to this day is open-mindedness. We were an online dating company. You can imagine some of the conversations that were happening in our boardroom, about people's behaviors, and we are a very open-minded online dating company as well. So, if you showed up at our place for a job and you were homophobic, or, you didn't believe in premarital sex, nothing wrong with that. To each their own. Every religion has their boundaries, but our place, you wouldn't have been a good fit because we were a lot about premarital sex. I should qualify. We weren't all about premarital sex. We were a lot about premarital sex. So if you showed up at our place with preconceived judgments, is my point, about how other people should live their life sexually, intimately, or otherwise, you wouldn't have been a good fit. We had to screen for that open-minded value. And when we got away from it, we paid the price. Went all the way through product development, marketing, and you can imagine, the impact closed-mindedness would have on an online dating community, in the 90s. It would have been the kiss of death. So very, very important that you not only articulate what you're about as a company, and I don't care if you're 2 people, 10, or on your way to 100, and it becomes more important as you're on your way to 100, because you might, as the founder, not be involved in every hire as you grow. So what blueprint and playbook are your people using to screen and measure and evaluate the kind of culture building people that you bring into your organization? The further you get from it, the harder it gets to maintain. But I'm telling you that it's everything. It is everything. I've seen too many really good ideas, which by the way are a dime a dozen. Too many good ideas get ruined by dysfunctional teams or teams that can't, get to the right answer because of infighting and get distracted about other people's agendas. Seen too many of them. On the flip side, I've seen some so-so ideas, frankly, right? That doesn't look like it's a great, but I've seen some so-so ideas knock the ball out of the park because the teams were like killer, right? Cohesive. This is where we're headed. This is how we're managing ourselves. Hey, and the whole company's like us. Not like us, but we get along, right? And we can appreciate each other's points of view, and we know how to work together. Just like Madison's soccer team that won the championships. That's how it's done, I learned a couple of other things. I learned that, listen, this, especially in technology, but really it applies to all businesses. I look through all businesses basically through this lens. It's about customer acquisition, right? Is really what it's about. Whether that customer is a consumer or a business, it's about how much do I have to spend to acquire this customer, and how much is this customer going to be worth to me over time? That you can basically break down almost any business into those two things. Where am I going to get them? How much are they going to cost me? What is the likelihood they're going to stick around? And how does the cost of getting them compare to what those customers are worth? Because no matter how quick you're growing, at some point in your future, you're going to have to turn a profit and drive a bottom line. We're not that concerned about it when you're growing like a weed, because you should be reinvesting all your profits into getting more customers if the customers are being acquired for less than what the customers are worth. But one day that's going to form the basis of a gross margin, and you're going to need a gross margin to cover all of your operating expenses in order to turn a profit. And as investors, that's the kind of analysis, thinking, that's what we're going to go through when we evaluate your business. And it's something that I think you need to be going through on an ongoing basis. Listen, the other thing I learned growing a dating business is to do what you love, right? I mean, we were four guys in our 20s and early 30s. You know, if we weren't growing a dating business, trying to meet, using a dating business to try and meet girls, we would have been out trying to meet girls anyway. So we were very close to what we would have been doing in our spare time, quite frankly. So when we were working on a better way to put men and women, men and men, women and women together, when we were working on that on a Sunday, it didn't feel so much like work. It almost felt a bit like a hobby, so that brings up an interesting point, that another fabric that I've seen, not only through this call, frankly, but almost everyone's addressed it. But a very big topic of our time is mental health, okay? And it's controversial because we've also heard on this call words like perseverance, stick-to-itness, work ethic, grinding. I mean, it's a very fine line. And I've come under some fire for it because I don't know any other way other than to completely devote myself to whatever endeavor I'm doing. So I'll share with you my definition of work-life balance for an entrepreneur. I'm not prescribing it. And by the way, entrepreneurship, for this very reason, amongst others, isn't for everybody, right? But my view of it is like, look, put your head down, grow a business over 10 years, work like crazy, sell it, and then take a couple of years off, and then decide whether you want to do it again. How about that as a definition of work-life balance? Take a longer term view of it. Now, I'm not saying if you're lying awake at night, if you're not a good partner to your spouse, if you're kicking the dog, all the different signs that you're not coping with things particularly well, I may suggest that you need a different definition of work-life balance, or I may also suggest that you may be better off going to work for an entrepreneur and let them worry about business on the weekends, and have your weekends and pick up a hobby and, learn to do other things. There's nothing wrong with that. Entrepreneurism is not, something that the planet has to aspire to, right? And I bet if I did a survey of the people on this call, how many of you are, feeling the pain, right? And questioning things. It's far from glamorous. And I think people realize that once they get into it. Here's where we find ourselves today. Paul dealt with it at the top of the day. Listen, disruption is everywhere. There's no such thing as an industry that isn't being disrupted by technology. We've produced more data in the last, I would say, 7 days, maybe 14, than we've produced in the whole history of mankind. That's the kind of exponential growth of data production that we're on. Not all of it's particularly useful data, I've got 2 kids, and I can tell you that a lot of the things that they consume are not useful or helpful for anybody, but a lot of the data that is being produced is incredibly useful. Paul's raised some flags. There's 2 issues of our time that we're going to be dealing with in the next 5 years, big time. And they both involve getting at the truth. There's the death of local, well-researched news that we can depend on as being truthful. And there's the AI manipulation that hides the truth and peddles lies. And there's going to be a lot that you're going to read about, and a lot that governments, frankly, are going to have to do, starting with Facebook, the biggest perpetrator of it all. I'm on a personal boycott, no interest in the platform anywhere. I think it's despicable how they've behaved. I know it's a key part of a lot of your marketing platform. Don't let me talk you out of it. You just won't have me as a customer through Facebook. And by the way, you know, yes, we've been through an incredibly difficult time. There's no question. And yes, some businesses have found a way to thrive. Many have been hurt badly, but we're coming back, okay? Because one thing that, again, that I've noticed looking back is that we always exaggerate the pendulum of change. We always think that it's going to be more than it is. We are coming back to the office because we're social creatures. We want to be with each other. The office towers aren't going anywhere. Yes, we might work a little bit more remotely. We've learned how to do that. Yes, we're definitely going to buy more online than in person, but the pendulum never swings as much as we think it will when we're in our deepest, darkest days. So we're almost there. Let me finish with a Dragon's Den story because it's relevant. I don't talk a ton about the show. I spent 3 years on it. It was a lot of fun. 3 years was enough. We used to see 230 business pitches a day. A season over 20 days, right? So there's a lot. It's an entrepreneur's smorgasbord. There's no doubt about it. But you see a lot of businesses. But I was struck by one thing. And I think it's an important point that will come out of all of this. I don't remember a ton from university. I wasn't a good student, but I do remember this guy named Maslow. And he had this thing called the hierarchy of needs. And he basically said, listen, everybody needs food and water. If you don't have food and water, you're gonna die, okay? So that is a basic human need. So if you have an idea to revolutionize how food is produced or how we get water more efficiently or how we save water, at least you're starting with a basic human need. You don't have to convince me that the idea or at least the subject matter has some merit. Next thing up after you've eaten and you're not thirsty is you need a roof over your head. Okay, so you can do it without a roof over your head. Winnipeg in February, for those of us in the north, Winnipeg, Toronto, it's tough. Some people don't have a choice. My heart goes out to those people. It's tough to live in the street in the wintertime in Canada. So generally speaking, we're looking for a roof over our head next up for Maslow. Thankfully for me in the online dating industry, the next thing we were looking for was someone to lie down beside at night. So this basic human need of being able to connect with each other was primal, right? So when we came out with a revolutionary new way for people to connect with each other, the marketing was very easy because it was a built-up need. We were replacing the bar scene, the back of the classified newspapers, etc. So it was a very welcome addition to the scene, and that helped us a lot. That we were able to market something that was obviously clearly needed. The last pitch of the last season that I was on Dragon's Den, and my experience had been, that the pitches go for 40 minutes. They edit it down to the 7 that you see on TV. And in my experience, particularly my last year, for whatever reason, maybe I was getting more critical, it seemed that a lot of the pitchers would spend the first 30 minutes of the 40 trying to convince us that there was a basic human need. They were solving a real problem with this idea. We never heard of this idea, let alone buying into that it was a problem in the first place. But so a lot of them were trying to solve problems that weren't really problems, right? And I'll remember and then if they got us there, the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes is what you saw us negotiating the deal. And we'd asked all our questions and shook hands and, you know, tried to get something done. So the last pitch, last season, this lady comes out in front of the cameras, and she was from Rosedale. So for those of you that don't know Toronto that well, Rosedale is kind of the area that people go when they've made too much money and they're trying to, you know, shelter themselves from their fellow man and woman. You know, they just sort of, it gives you space, you lock around, it's a bit of an enclave. And so she comes out with this carriage. She's pushing a carriage, and it was what it was a dog carriage, and it was designed to push your dog, to take your dog to the park when your dog got too old to walk themselves there. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. Being from Rosedale, it wasn't any ordinary dog carriage. This thing was 4-wheel drive. It had a beautiful paint job, umbrella for the dog, umbrella for the walker, latte holder for the walker, bone holder for the dog. Like it was sweet as far as, you know, carriages go. I think I said 4-wheel drive for the winter. If I didn't, it had 4-wheel drive for the winter. So, but she says, you know, she said like it's for pushing your dog to the park when they get too old to walk there. So I was sitting down at one end of the stage that year, and Jim Treliving, the Boston pizza guy, great guy, by the way, if you get a chance to, I don't think he's coming back this season, but I've heard, him and I became very good friends. He comes from a town of population of about 150 in rural Manitoba called Vernon. Like there's more people on this call than there were population in Vernon. So I leaned forward, and this didn't make the edit, thank goodness, or I would have had the animal rights people after me. And I'm a dog lover, by the way, so don't take this the wrong way. I have a dog. But I leaned forward and I said, Jim, you know, just out of curiosity, what would they do to a dog in Vernon when it got too old to walk itself to the park? And, you know, of course, the answer was not a Rosedale 4-wheel drive dog carriage. It was a 10-cent solution. The dog was done, right? So all that to say, I knew when I saw that story and that idea that my days as you know, hearing ideas that were trying to solve problems that didn't really exist were kind of over. So I just would reiterate my message to you of earlier. When you're thinking of a new idea, thinking of a new venture, try and solve a real problem, because as I link that to what I said about marketing and customer acquisition, that all important, how much does it cost you to get a customer? The bigger problem you're solving, the less it's going to cost you to convince somebody to try it out. And the more likely it is that they're going to be able to stick around. That's how those ideas sort of hold together. I've just got my eye on the clock. It's 3:10. I was supposed to finish at 3. But listen, Lee, you know, I just saw your picture pop up there again. I got to say thanks again for having me out. It was, it's not often, right, that I get the opportunity to actually sit through the panels and the event that I'm part of speaking at. And I'm so glad that I did, right? Because you put together an incredible, inspirational set of speakers with some really groundbreaking ideas. And, you know, I think I said earlier, I'm closer to the end of my career than the beginning. And it gives me a lot of hope, right? That Canada will continue to be the best place on the planet, will continue to be the best place to continue to grow small business. We have to continue the pressure, that tension between us and the government to make sure that we're doing the right thing in tandem. Don't tax the heck out of small business. For anyone from the government still on the line, it's the lifeblood of our country, right? Take it from somewhere else, man. We need it because we're going to keep reinvesting it because those are the kind of people that we are. So thanks again. I look forward to seeing you all in person at some point. I think it's just around the corner. Let's get going. Keep the vaccines coming in. And, you know, thanks again for having me, and, you know, have a good rest of the week, everybody.
Wow, you know what? Thanks, Bruce, so much. And yes, we are going to do this again with this whole panel of people in person, because it was just too amazing today, and too many great stories. I can't thank everybody enough. Thank you for the attendees who tuned in. Thank you for all of the speakers. Paul, I'm going to have to talk to you later, because why didn't you make me an Avenger instead of a dog kidnapper? But, you know, then Bruce came along with the dog street carriage that maybe a stealer of dogs could use. So, you know, who knows? But anyways, thank you for all of the men and women on the call today who introduced people, who brought people to me for the opportunity for us to showcase them, for the women who presented. Every single one of you really resonated with not just the people on the call, but with the audience. Thank you for being for sharing stories that were so personal and so heartfelt, but also giving us information on how entrepreneurs could take that information that you learned along the way and grow their businesses and help them to survive, especially during COVID. If anybody has any questions, you can always get a hold of me at the WindsorEssex Economic Development Corporation. My email's on our website, and it's been a pleasure today. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a safe and happy and sunny week. Thank you. Bye-bye.